thank you very much for being in this session. It is great to see so many people from all corners around the world. This session will be conducted by Anupama Sekhar, the Director for Culture of the Asia-Europe Foundation. Anupama, the floor and the conduction is yours.
Thank you, Jordi. Hello, everyone. It's absolutely amazing to look at the chat window and see countries from every corner of the globe pop up. So welcome everyone to this Enjoy and Discover session, where we are hoping to investigate a little bit how the values of the Rome Charter are playing out in the great cities that we all live, work, play, and unfortunately now also are sheltering in. So welcome everyone. My name is Anupama Sekhar, and as Jordi mentioned, I work at the Asia-Europe Foundation, ASEF. For those of you who may not be familiar, this is an organization publicly funded by 51 countries across Asia and Europe, and our mandate is essentially to connect the civil societies of Asia and Europe. So every year we organize about 100 activities or projects, bringing together 3,000 professionals, artists, journalists, human rights activists, policymakers, young professionals, students, in what are essentially dialogue projects. And so for me, the Rome Charter really resonates when it says that culture is meant to be understood as a public forum, as a space where we democratize the process of negotiation and ultimately hope to arrive at better ways of living together in this inescapable diversity. I think that is very much the core of the work that I do at the Asia-Europe Foundation, because in the end, every single project that we create in the many cities that you all come from is creating safe spaces for unsafe ideas. That is at the heart of our work. And in doing that, I really see a lot of connections with the philosophy and the poetry, I would say, of the Rome Charter. So on that note, I now turn towards our speakers who are joining us today virtually from their homes and offices across the world. Mr. Solomon Mguni, the Honorable Mayor of Bulawayo, Zimbabwe's second largest city. And with him is Josh Nyapimbi, who is the Executive Director of the Nhimbe Trust and also Bulawayo City's Cultural Policy Advisor. A very warm welcome. And then we turn towards Canada, where joining us from Quebec is Pascale Charlebois from ATRAT, from the city of Abitibi, Temiscamingue. Welcome, Pascale. So let's get started by hearing what our speakers have to say about their experiences with culture and the Rome Charter in their own cities. And then we'll have the opportunity to share a few questions with them. And I welcome your comments and your questions in the chat window. You can keep them coming throughout the session and I'll pick up on them once we've heard from our speakers. So now I turn to our speakers from Bulawayo. I understand we'll have a video first, and then they will join us for the live conversation. Over to you.
Milestones that have been realized in developing the 2020 Rome Cultural Rights Charter. Cultural rights in their diverse manifestations occupy a norms and conceptual frameworks. Bulawayo holds cultural and culture consciousness in highest esteem. These represent the core fabric of the individual and collective identity that defines us as people. We are proud that we confidently can assert that we are the only city in Zimbabwe that can host a diverse multicultural program without importing any talent. Promoting co-creation, participation, inclusivity is the fundament of which we draw to ensure that our governance strategies are accurately reflective of this diversity and cultural assets of the city. Our smart city strategy, which is a human-centric approach to development, is about intelligent methodology that we employ in creating and implementing an ecosystem of smart city solutions. The timely emergence of Rome Charter is welcome development in informing some of our methodologies, particularly in areas of access to and participation in cultural life. The advent of COVID-19, although disruptive in nature, has been regarded by our policymakers, citizens, artists, and cultural professionals as an opportunity to rethink what cultural participation means and entails in the context of discovering cultural roots and enjoying all of the city's cultural resources. The reconfiguration of the cultural life has seen us create and adopt mechanisms that have an orientation towards building the city's digital capacities and resilience. One such intervention has been the hosting of the Bulawayo Arts Festival online, and the status the festival has garnered as Zimbabwe's first ever festival to be programmed and streamed through digital platforms. As a trendsetter, city that strives on cultural excellence and the mainstreaming of culture in all spheres of development, our milestone in digital programming has been recognized by national government as a noble act of inclusivity needed in a country that continues to nurture participation in sustainable development. In line with the vision of devolution, while digital technology interventions have had a significant role to play in ensuring the continuity of cultural programming, participation, and access, they've detached citizens from the right and will to choose how they want to access expressions from a myriad of options. What our smart city strategy communicates expressly is that technology is indeed an enabler, but should not mistakenly be regarded as the singular conduit of driving culture-led development and citizen participation engagement. The relationship between people, place, culture, and space is a priority area in Bulawayo. In times of crisis such as these, rethinking cultural life and participation should be aligned to concerns about how extracting a cultural expression and experience from a physical space undermines cultural integrity. From our experience as a city, it is easy to build citizen capacity to engage in cultural life digitally, in advancement and promotion of cultural rights and fundamental freedoms. But the value of physical spaces offers an experience that can neither be replicated nor replaced. We are immensely proud as a city to have been incorporated into the network and ecosystem of UCLG. The Charter's proclamation of cultural democracy and its articulation of the impetus it places on us as local government to act will offer an opportunity to strengthen the localization of SDGs. The AU Agenda 2063 and the National Cultural Policy. We are committed as a city to build on our cultural assets to develop competencies that will allow us to successfully craft the Rome Charter into strategic development parameters of the city, particularly those targeted at cultural participation, co-creation, and smart solutions.
Cultural policy making is a new phenomenon in Zimbabwe, owing to the absence of national frameworks to guide local government interventions in the formulation of local cultural policies and strategies to drive cultural policy actions at local government level. The slow progress at local government level is a clear representation of the lack of progress at the national level. That is, with regards to the development and launch of the National Arts, Culture and Heritage Strategy, which is still a huge gap. The process of coming up with the National Arts, Culture and Heritage Policy took a decade, only to be launched in November 2019. Within the context of cultural governance, the City of Bulawayo's Arts, Culture and Heritage Strategy, as a living policy document, should be a localization of the National Arts, Culture and Heritage Policy, the National Arts, Culture and Heritage Strategy, and the National Policy on Devolution. Lack of progress in the implementation plan of the above policies directly affects the creation of the City of Bulawayo's Arts, Culture and Heritage-based policies. Although there is no living policy document, the strategic pillars of the eminent city arts and culture strategy in terms of the promotion and the protection of arts, culture and heritage within the framing of cultural rights are already in practice. And this is an encouraging development against the odds. The City of Bulawayo has recorded some tremendous strides in the realization of promotion of the local cultural policy in terms of articulating it at a strategy level. And these come in the form of the Bulawayo Arts, Culture and Heritage Endowment Fund, whose primary purpose is to provide a resource base for the support of arts, culture and heritage priorities as identified by the city and its stakeholders, as well as the Bulawayo Cultural Affairs Office, whose primary purpose is to support and facilitate citizen engagement and access to spaces, technical support to City Council, and developing cultural cooperation partnerships with various local and international stakeholders. Cultural participation within the context of co-creating the city has been identified by the City of Bulawayo as our priority in the absence of a formal strategy to drive the cultural policy implementation process. The aim thus being to comprehensively and holistically map barriers to citizen participation in cultural life for the formulation of targeted interventions that would develop resilient urban communities that not only participate in cultural life as audience, but as active participants in the planning, ownership, and the execution of the city's cultural life. The Bulawayo Arts Festival, launched in 2020 digitally, is one fine example in which the city is trying to realize its aspirations in cultural participation. The challenge, however, still remains where artists and cultural professionals remain the main demographic that the festival is premised and dependent on for audiences. Our operational actions going forward, we envision the need for cultural participation index for statistics capturing, lobbying for incorporation of cultural participation surveys in national and city census frameworks, resources and time permitting. We are in the process of exploring how the forthcoming national census may take some of these aspirations on board. Ensuring that the discourse of business or commercialization of artistic expressions within the context of cultural rights is sensitive to the relationship between human rights and business. For this, we are premising our interventions within the UN guidelines and principles on business and human rights.
Thank you for that, Jordi and the UCLG team. We'll turn to Pascale now for her presentation, and Josh and Mayor, would you like to say something to add on to your video, or we come back to you during the question and answer session?
You can come back to us during the question and answer session.
Okay, perfect. So Pascale, we turn to you. The floor is yours.
Well, do you hear me? We were unmuting at the same time. Thank you, Anupama. Jordi, do you want to show the video first? If it's okay, it's a 1-minute video, but we can skip that part too.
I'll try.
Okay.
Just.
Deep down, we wanted to be proud of ourselves, driven by our desire to express our uniqueness through our culture. We've left our mark on the territory. More specifically, Cultura is the realization of intelligent, welcoming, historical, and artistic large-scale projects funded by municipalities. The dynamic businessmen and women who laid the ground for innovative projects transforming our daily lives and making it more beautiful. The citizens and organizations who have set up street libraries and planted flowers. The festivals that have put on the emblematic color and have created collective masterpieces. And finally, the quotes from locals written on building walls. Cultura is also a meeting with the Anishinaabe culture and its fascinating wealth. Cultura is 60 municipalities, 7 band councils, and 17 organizations. But basically, it's everyone who lives in the Abitibi Temiscamingue region. We sprinkled pride everywhere. And you know what? We won't stop there.
Thank you, Jordi. So do you hear me now? Yes, okay. First, I would like to thank Jordi Pascale and the Rome Charters Conference for inviting me. This charter is an excellent initiative, so congratulations. Can we show the PowerPoint? I will present you the initiative Cultura. You've seen a little bit of a small part of projects that were made here in Abitibi Temiscamingue, which is a region, not a city. We have 500 projects right now, over 500 projects now, right now. Can we enlarge it or something? Okay. You can go to the second. So I will first I will present you my region, Abitibi Temiscamingue. It is located in Canada, as we can see on the map. In Quebec's province, in light blue. We are the space in darker blue that looks small, but it's twice the size of Belgium, 65,000 square kilometers. However, we are only 150,000 inhabitants. So we have a lot of space, a lot of forest, and up to 22,000 lakes and rivers, as you can see on the picture. Abitibi Temiscamingue is an Anishinaabe name. The Anishinaabe people are the first nation who live here for 3,000 years. And our cities are 100-year-old or even less. So they were here first. Still, we are considered as the youngest region in Quebec. Now let's talk about Cultura. Cultura, I think you can skip to the, okay. Cultura is a regional mobilization approach that promotes arts and culture as a sustainable practice and powerful means of enhancing citizens' well-being. It is supported by Abitibi Temiscamingue Tourism, the regional tourism association. Abitibi Temiscamingue's economy is based on mines and forestry. As you can see, it marks the landscape. And we do have a few individual scrapyards too, but less than a few years ago. You can skip to the other one. We didn't want it to be the only thing you remember, so here's what we did. Now in Abitibi Temiscamingue, you can find a lot of public art everywhere throughout the region. You can skip to the other one. Here's our mobilization model. What you should consider is one-on-one meetings are more than necessary if you want to gain trust and make sure they see the importance of culture in their own city, business, school, life, etc. B, don't underestimate the ripple effect and manage it if you can. For example, we did a huge launching conference where all participant mayors announced their signature to the charter and explained the projects they committed to achieve through Cultura. That's what really started the whole movement. We also did more than 100 videos about projects that were broadcast by the local medias. So that strongly influenced residents who now consider at 91% Cultura as a community-based project. You can skip to the other one. Since last year, we are part of the leading cities of UCLG as a leading territory, thanks to Cultura. The other one. As the other leaders of that network, Cultura is based on the Sustainable Development Agenda outlined in the Agenda 21 for Culture. As I said, our region is also twice the size of Belgium. So we have 5 regional county municipalities, 66 municipalities, and 7 band councils. In last December, we did the self-assessment process with Antoine Guibert, expert at UCLG. Hello, Antoine. And found it very difficult to evaluate the whole region. The policies are very different from one place to another, and there are many inequalities between territories in terms of culture. However, it was a good exercise because it made the participants notice their differences, and now they want to share their expertise. They want to create something as a regional cultural development agency or something that allows them to talk about culture and share their good practices. But remember, it's a regional tourism associations project, which means we are not policymakers. That's why we decided to convince every stakeholder by action, and we were counting on the ripple effect. With the Leader Cities program, we want to work on cultural mediations. We think it's a great way to integrate immigrants and to retain them because the region needs a lot of workers due to our aging population. We already heard about these results in the video, so it's the next, skip that. Yeah, we've heard about these results in the video, but I would like to focus your attention on the 7-on-7 band councils and tell you more about how we help communities defending their cultural rights. You can skip. If you had come to Abitibi Temiscamingue 10 years ago, you couldn't even notice it is an Anishinaabe territory. As our friend François Bédard from the World Center of Excellence for Destinations, hello François, as he told us, communities were invisible. The residential schools in Canada strongly impacted their lives. As you may know, children were pulled out from their parents and their forest home and then forced to go to school. In this school, they were taught in English or in French to hate their own culture, their own identity, and be ashamed of their language. Thus, the first step wasn't to share either protect their culture, but even for them to discover it. They had to be proud of it, to learn again to love it. It wasn't easy. My colleague Caroline Lemire went many times to each community to meet them, but she finally got them to sign the charter. So with them, we created the Anishinaabe Cultural Circle. But the 7 communities are spread all over the region. They are distanced by at least 1, in some cases 4 hours drive. They are far geographically, but also linguistically. As we are close to Ontario, half of our communities went to residential schools over in Ontario, so they learned English, and the other half went to French schools in Quebec. The 7 communities tried before to gather around political issues, but that never really worked. When we created the Anishinaabe Cultural Circle, they gathered for the first time to talk about culture, and they realized they might all have a different piece of the puzzle. Then we found artists, but this word might be delicate though, because their culture is heavily related, sorry for my English, to their traditional spirituality. Some members of the community think artists are traitors, and others are still ashamed of their traditions. So we had to be careful with that word. But still, we found artists and make them proud. We brought them to do professional projects, sometimes outside their community. We also proposed activities in school. A few years before, when my son was in 3rd grade, he learned about Mayas, Aztecs, Iroquois, and Algonquins, a vast linguistic family that includes Anishinaabe. So even if we are in Anishinaabe territory, the school's program did not mention even their presence. We created an offer of conferences and activities given by Anishinaabe and held a contest for all classes around the region called I Want to Know You. To participate, they had to learn about the Anishinaabe culture and choose at least one element to conduct an activity. Some did drawings, for example, and a whole school learned a song in Anishinaabe. We also did a lot of things, but I have to be more concise, sorry. So I will finish with the support we gave to the creation of Minashan, which means beautiful in Anishinaabe because they have no word for heart. It is a cultural Anishinaabe organization that aims to enhance, transmit, and produce culture, and it has a 100 Aboriginal board. You can skip to the other one. Of course, as a tourism association, we are a lot impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic. It is catastrophic for the tourism industry, but I must say that Cultura is safe. As it is a philosophy more than a structure, it lives now without us. People, industries, municipalities, businesses, and schools continue to do projects. Even if they don't say it's Cultura, the goal is the same. It leads to citizens' happiness as long as cultural tourism. Now it is time for us to start new projects and to enhance innovation and well-being. So I will have to come back to another conference to tell you more about that. Can skip to the last one. Merci, thank you, miigwech.
Thank you very much, Pascale. I'll jump straight to a question that I see on the chat, and then I'll come back to ask you a few questions from my side. So the question here is about, are there linking networking organizations, and I suppose UCLG is one of them itself, where artists and cultural operators working in very many different countries could collaborate? And I'm going to add on a couple of questions from my side and then turn to you both, to the three of you to respond to them. I was wondering now, given the Rome Charter and the current conditions we are living in, looking at our communities in the effect of the pandemic, how can we localize the Charter now, and how has COVID changed the conversation for us? So this is my first question. My second question is, both of you, in the two examples we spoke about the barriers to citizen participation. When Josh presented in the video, I found it very compelling, Josh, that you said that it is not about our citizens joining as audiences, but how to get them involved in planning. So I was wondering what particular challenges Bulawayo faced in this regard, and if Honorable Mayor or you, Josh, could elaborate on that, and how did you solve that, and how did you bring them into planning? That would be interesting. And turning to you, Pascale, I found your comments about art and the controversy that could surround it very, very interesting, because you began your presentation by saying that you have placed public art everywhere, and there were beautiful, striking images. So I was wondering, seeing these images in the public and also among the First Nations, has their idea about art and the role of art or artists in society, has it changed dramatically? So let's get started with this. Could I turn to George and Mr. Mguni to perhaps respond first?
Yes, maybe if I can respond first. You can hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, but we don't see you very well. If you could just tilt the camera a little up so we don't see your face. Yes, perfect. We see you. Please go ahead.
No, thank you. I will respond to the question that relates to policy in terms of planning. There's a concern that has been raised to the effect that there's low public participation in decision making, in policy formulation, as far as culture, art and culture is concerned. I want to start by saying that Bulawayo as a city, one of its values is consultativeness. We value consultations, we consult the public, and we have spoken in our video. We spoke about the evolution of culture to say that the city itself, as represented by elected representatives and official technocrats, is in charge of the planning and the formulation of policy. But that policy must now be taken to the people before it becomes a policy, because you cannot then force something onto the people. You must consult, and part of consultations is to find if there will be partaking from the people who are the consumers of the product. So basically, from the city is in charge of formulation of policy. But then we go to the wards where individual councillors are elected are coming from. And then those wards, the councillors are now responsible for taking that policy to the people, the consultation part of it. But even in those wards now, we are talking of now the infrastructure that is there in those wards, the physical infrastructure. We are talking of community halls where these artists and the artists rather, where they perform, etc., and where they come from. You may find out that from a different ward, there can be people coming in, musicians or actors, etc., depending on different wards where the people are coming from. So you need to consult, because you may take a certain discipline to a different ward where that particular discipline is not prevalent. So you have to consult. And even then, when you cascade down from the wards, you go to the suburbs. And the suburbs, we have what we call the youth centers, which feeds into these the ward groups. So indeed, there is, as much as policies made at the city level by elected representatives, we take those policies to the people to consult, because one of our values is consultativeness. So I thought I should share that with colleagues.
Thank you very much for that. Josh, would you like to add something as well?
Yes, in terms of the stakeholder consultation process, the stakeholders are clustered into thematic areas: civil society, the arts and culture sector, including artists and cultural professionals, the business community, churches and religious groups. So that's the idea. Then once the submissions are done, they are synthesized together for council consideration. And for the decisions that the local authority does, there's what they call council resolutions. If I would liken it for a layman person to what happens at Parliament, it could be an equivalent of like a statutory instrument. So these are kind of binding statutes that the council would put in place. So for the setting up of the Bulawayo Cultural Affairs Office, there is a council resolution to that effect. for the Bulawayo Arts Festival to be in place, there was a consultation and a council resolution to that effect. And for the Bulawayo Arts, Culture and Heritage Endowment Fund, there was also consultation process, and there's a council resolution approving that to happen.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you for that. Pascale, could I turn to you to talk us through the issues around art and how artists and art are perceived? Over to you.
Yes, the perception really changes. Like a few years ago, artists, that when they went to businesses to have some financial help, it was really hard. And now every business wants its piece of art. Everyone, actually, we really cultivate the sense of pride. So, and the sense of belonging. So all inhabitants are really proud of the public arts. They say it gives colors to their everyday life. So we've really seen changing in the perception, also because the artists have now a lot of contracts. Some are really busy. So
okay,
does it answer? Yeah.
Yes, thank you for that. I'd like to, Pascale, since we have you on the floor, you mentioned that the territory was essentially a First Nations land, and
Yes.
their cultures have sort of disappeared from their own memories. In your cultural projects, have there been projects that connect First Nations people with others, indigenous and non-indigenous cultures, getting them to work together, to collaborate, or were they approached always separately, as separate groups?
No, we are doing projects mixed together. So we took Aboriginal artists, Anishinaabe artists. We don't like Aboriginal word. We took Anishinaabe artists and mixed them with Quebecers artists, and so they can meet. We really enjoyed the fact that people meet.
Right.
It is really important in the approach.
Mm-hmm. And was there any, to come back to the question that our colleagues from Bulawayo answered about barriers to participation, was there any resistance barriers that you felt from the Anishinaabe people? Did they resist? Did they feel this is not for me? And how did you overcome that challenge to get them fully involved in the process? Because I assume they've had, hundreds of years of an eradication of culture. So how do you undo that?
There was a lot of missions. Can just
yeah.
Okay.
Mission,
It's also an English word in the beginning, because they were used to give their traditions and talk about the traditions, and people will take it and go and never come back with reports and things like that. So they were really not really okay with that in the beginning. We did a lot of one-on-one meetings, and we brought them to find their solutions with the Anishinaabe Cultural Circle.
Okay, yeah.
So we kind of take a step forward and give them the space to share together first. Okay. And then we had one-on-one meetings too with artists, and we were just trying to bring them to a professional statue.
Okay. Thank you. I see a question for you from the audience asking if there is a fund exclusively from the government to support the artists.
Actually, it's a good question because Cultura is a tourism association project, and it's really difficult to fund. So we basically did that with no fundings or almost none. A part of our employees were paid by the accommodation tax. But we basically, as we don't do projects, we just support people to do and convince them to do, we didn't need a lot of money.
Okay.
It was basically just communications.
Okay. Okay. Great. Thank you. I'll turn now to our colleagues from Bulawayo. You mentioned the cultural participation index and the need to build cultural statistics. So I was wondering, what is the situation now in terms of cultural statistics, and what do you hope to build, and how would you use that in policy making in the city? And I would also like to return to the question of localizing the Rome Charter, particularly in these sort of uncertain and stressful times when we also have the challenge of the COVID-19 pandemic. So it would be great to hear your thoughts on that.
Okay, I'll speak to the prospects of localizing the Rome Charter, and Josh will share the statistics. But just to say that in our presentation, we've said we host numerous cultural activities in the city, and these draw artists from across the country and the region, and even international. We have what comes to my mind is the Ibumba International Arts Festival, the Bulawayo Arts Awards, the Intwasa, the Bulawayo Arts Festival, which the inaugural one, which was held virtually this year in June. So basically, in terms of the attendances and the interest in these festivals, Josh will handle that. But coming to localizing, I think as a city we have done a lot in terms of localizing the charter. But what is important now, we may have done it without really speaking to the charter in terms of the activities that we have done in the city in terms of promoting arts, culture, and heritage. But now that the document is there, we now have to take it through those processes that my colleague Josh have said, that we are a consultative city. We have clusters that we consult the church, the artists, etc., so that there's a public feel, a public ownership of the charter. So basically, this is where we are going from now, to then take the charter to our stakeholders, so that it's not something that we are imposing as a city on them, but they must have a feel of it to say that it's something which they own. So that is what I can say in terms of, yes.
Thank you for that. George, would you like to come in and also add to this?
I will speak to cultural statistics. By way of brief background, the Nhimbe Trust has benefited from the UNESCO cultural statistics trainings in country, whose experience and knowledge we are now also extending to the city as a technical partner. Further to that, at a national level, the Culture Fund of Zimbabwe, in partnership with the National Arts Council and the National Statistics Agency, with funding from the IFCD of UNESCO, did conduct some baseline survey, which contributed to the initial steps of the the national statistical agents being sensitive to the needs of cultural statistics within the national framework. Given the scale of the program, obviously there were limitations and gaps in terms of the demographic that was covered for sampling purposes. What we are doing now as a city is the local policies have to speak to the national. We are looking at this work that has been done and see what opportunities are there to develop a prototype at a city level. We are still at a very formative stage of giving a substantive detail to this.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Okay. Thank you very much for that. And I'd like to our colleagues from Bulawayo, I'd like to raise the question that we had from our audience that Pascale answered about the support available to artists in Zimbabwe, whether at the national level or at the city level. What kind of support has been available to individual artists, to groups and organizations? And now currently, given the COVID-19 pandemic, is there any special support being offered, either at the national level or at the local government level? If you could comment on that.
Okay, let me, Josh will speak to what the artists are getting from the from national government as a stakeholder in the arts fraternity. I think just to say that arts in Zimbabwe, they are under the administration or the oversight of the National Arts Council. I'm sure that there is a national culture fund that is administered there by that. And when it came to COVID, I'm sure there were some stipends, some disbursements that were done by government to try and alleviate the plight of artists during this COVID-19 pandemic. But Joshua will speak to the substantive issues pertaining to this support that artists are getting from government. But as a city, we have a dedicated department to deal with the arts, culture, and heritage because of our history, the city's history, the identity of the city as a cultural hub of the nation, and how we became a city. The history is very, 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 very long. I won't belabor you by narrating that. But what I can say is that we have a dedicated department, which is the Department of Housing and Community Services. So the community services aspect of it deals with the infrastructure provision, deals with the nurturing of these artists. We do bursaries for those artists who are performing well at school and performing well in arts, so that they can pursue their careers in that diverse field of arts. So basically, this is what we are doing. And even our budget speaks to arts and culture and heritage in terms of our budgeting year in, year out. So basically, this is what the city is doing in terms of supporting the artists.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Josh, I turn to you. The floor is yours if you'd like to add on.
Okay, a little add-on before I move on to the funding prospects is, in our view, the biggest contribution from the city to the culture sector is space provision. Most of our artists and cultural professionals and groups and enterprises work within council spaces or infrastructure, be it community halls, youth centers, and spaces, either for free or at subsidized rates. I believe it takes some form of a very elaborate baseline to establish how much this translates in financial terms, because often it's very easy to lose sight of such contributions where they are not given as checks or as money. So there's a real need for us to do a baseline and quantify and qualify this enormous contribution. At a national level, the government, through various lobbying from civil society from throughout the country, found it fit, based on the examples that we were giving of how other governments were responding to the COVID-19 impact on CCIs. So the government of Zimbabwe, though very modestly, introduced a fund to support artists and cultural professionals with small grants to keep them going, what I would term social grants. So the grants that are being provided by government are not, they are very limited to make an impact on enterprises and institutions, but more on the individual level.
Okay, thank you very much. I think time is upon us and we will have to wrap up very soon. So to wrap up our conversation, Jordi, I'm going to turn to you, Jordi, from UCLG. You've been listening to 2 days of conversations from across different cities in the world. What resonates for you from what you have heard today, which is identical to something you've heard before, and what is completely different that you have heard today? So the last word is yours before we say goodbye to our speakers.
Thank you, Anupama. Congratulations for the conduction, and congratulations to Pascale, Josh, and the mayor for great inputs. This question is extremely difficult, Anupama, but and we have not much time. But let me also answer that question in a very concise way. What we are learning in the conference, what we are noticing is the fact that inequalities is the, say, hidden dimension of cultural policies. And either cultural policies explicitly address this obstacle, or cultural policies could not be able to respond to what society expects from cultural policies. And we are seeing this fact, the consideration of inequalities as the dimension that needs to be explicitly addressed at a local level everywhere. We are seeing it in all continents. And probably this is one of the challenges that we, as UCLG and as a global platform, that we are devoted to support local cultural policies with our tools, with the Rome Charter, with Culture 21 actions, with our program of pilot cities, with the 7 keys. We have to work in that direction. Yeah.
Thank you very much. On that note, thank you to our lovely audience, to our speakers, Mayor Mguni, Pascale, George, thank you for joining us today, and wishing you all a happy rest of the conference. Thank you, everyone. Thank you. Have a good day or evening ahead. Bye-bye.
Muy buenas tardes a todas. Bienvenidas a esta segunda sesión que vamos a dedicar a los conceptos de crear y disfrutar. Estamos en la conferencia de la Carta de Roma 2020, organizada conjuntamente por el Ayuntamiento de Roma y la Comisión de Cultura de Ciudades y Gobiernos Locales Unidos. Mi nombre es Jordi Pascual y soy el coordinador de la Comisión de Cultura. Encantado de tener a todas ustedes en esta sesión, en este conversatorio de Zoom. Un gusto tenerles a todas y a todos en este conversatorio. Me ha pedido Inti Muñoz que modere yo la sesión por un problema de última hora en la Ciudad de México, por una comparecencia del equipo de la Secretaría de Cultura en la Asamblea local, y con mucho gusto pues tomo este reto. Tenemos a 3 ponentes, a 3 personas invitadas. Tenemos a Tatiana de San José de Costa Rica, a Andrés de La Paz y a Paulo de Santa Fe. Si os parece bien, voy a presentaros muy brevemente a cada uno de vosotros. En primer lugar va a tomar la palabra Andrés Zaratti. Es el secretario municipal de Culturas en el Gobierno Autónomo Municipal de La Paz. En segundo lugar va a tomar la palabra Tatiana Chaves, que es la directora de Cultura de San José de Costa Rica. Y en tercer lugar va a tomar la palabra Paulo Ricci, que es el secretario de Cultura de Santa Fe. Andrés, sin más dilación, tienes la palabra en los próximos 10 minutos.
Muchas gracias, Jordi. Un saludo muy cordial. Te pediría si nos podrían colgar la presentación que enviamos.
Voy a intentarlo. Ahí voy.
También te aprovecho para saludar a Paulo, a Tatiana, ¿no? Y al resto de la audiencia que está con nosotros. Un saludo de esta ciudad de 3.600 metros sobre el nivel del mar. Que no se tienen que asustar con frío, a diferencia de Costa Rica, pero que es igual.
Ahí va.
Muy bien. Primero quiero comenzar hablando un poco sobre el escenario cultural de la ciudad de La Paz. Es la primera filmina, Jordi. Hay que entender que la ciudad de La Paz es una ciudad que es la capital política de Bolivia. Es una ciudad que se caracteriza por tener una raíz cultural andina muy fuerte, pero también es la síntesis del país. En este sentido, es un municipio pluricultural, multiétnico, que se basa y se ha desarrollado en función de una acción intercultural donde han surgido expresiones de carácter ancestral, sobre todo andino, ligadas a expresiones más mestizas, pero también con diálogo con las expresiones de la cultura mundial. Y esto ha generado, si bien un desarrollo y una característica específica de la ciudad, pero no ha estado exento de tensiones, conflictos y también algún tipo de pugnas socioculturales. En ese sentido, con este marco, nosotros queremos entrar a ver cuál es la visión conceptual como trabajamos en el municipio de La Paz, que es la siguiente filmina, donde hemos estado trabajando en que estamos convencidos que la cultura mejora la calidad de vida. Como tal, ¿me lo podías pasar, Jordi, por favor? Mejora la calidad de vida, que implica que hemos asumido, como sabemos todos, que la cultura es un cuarto pilar del desarrollo sostenible, no solo de manera transversal, sino se encuentra en varias de nuestras normativas, tratando realmente de generar este diálogo y esta incorporación de este concepto en toda la planificación urbana del municipio. Esto convencidos que la cultura genera cohesión y visibilización social, permite transformación social, pero también logra la integración a nivel de la sociedad, pero también de la región, y permite la inclusión de sectores vulnerables. Y finalmente, algo que hemos venido trabajando el último tiempo, que genera desarrollo económico. En ese contexto, nuestras acciones están ligadas, por un lado, a generar políticas ligadas específicamente al sector, promoviendo la agenda, trabajando con los gestores y actores culturales y buscando generar una ciudadanía intercultural, pero también en los últimos años hemos venido trabajando en generar programas estratégicos integrales que implica esta imbricación entre las políticas culturales con el resto de políticas sociales, económicas, educativas, ambientales, urbanísticas de la ciudad, en la lógica de generar un impacto y desde la cultura tratar de resolver varios de los problemas que enfrentamos como ciudad. Para este fin, dentro de nuestra visión conceptual, que es la siguiente filmina, hemos asumido al sujeto humano como el elemento central en nuestras políticas, asumiéndolo como un ser pluridentitario. Eso hace que nuestro accionar se basa sobre todo, por un lado, en la en la lógica de buscar construir las políticas públicas a través de una interacción y construcción colectiva, pero asumiendo un concepto que es central en nuestra política, que es la cogestión responsable. No hay ninguna acción, programa que desarrollamos que no tenemos una contraparte con la sociedad civil, en la medida que consideramos que ambos, tanto el Estado como la sociedad civil, son los responsables de desarrollar estas acciones. Esto en la lógica de buscar, por un lado, el ejercicio pleno de los derechos culturales, por otro lado, el reconocimiento de la pluralidad y diversidad, que es el motor y la característica de nuestra ciudad, y por ello el diálogo intercultural es la forma de accionar más evidente que desarrollamos, buscando no solo promover a los profesionales de las artes, sino sobre todo valorar la dimensión cotidiana de lo cultural, que es asumir al ciudadano también no solo como un espectador, sino como un agente que hace cultura y trabaja en ello. Eso hace que hemos asumido una visión integral e inclusiva. Por ejemplo, nosotros no denominamos cultura, sino cultura. Reconocemos que hay una diversidad de formas de entender el mundo, de concebir y de valorar que hacen y conviven, y eso implica que no hay una jerarquía y las tomamos a todas como igual. Y finalmente buscamos en esa lógica superar los conceptos de falsa tolerancia, que entendemos que es respetar al otro pero sin interactuar, y el de descolonización, que es un concepto que ha sido muy vigente en Latinoamérica, que tiene una lógica para nosotros perversa, porque te quita o busca extirparte algunos elementos culturales que supuestamente vienen de la colonia, que no permite más bien entender esta identidad plural que tienen los ciudadanos actualmente. A partir de ello, nuestra gestión cultural se basa básicamente en algunos aspectos, ¿no? Que es buscar el desarrollo cultural a través de propiciar condiciones óptimas al ámbito del sector cultural a través de infraestructuras, servicios, fondos concursables. Jordi, un clic, por favor, en la presentación. Posteriormente, nuestra otra función es el generar normativa para generar reglas claras de juego, garantizando los derechos y obligaciones de los distintos actores del sistema cultural. Busca también establecer puentes y espacios de encuentro y de diálogo alternativos. Creemos que es fundamental este rol que tenemos que tener desde la gestión pública, de que la gente interactúe, se encuentre, se mire en esa lógica de reconocer al otro como un igual. Por otro lado, buscamos garantizar el derecho histórico, garantizar el desarrollo histórico con contenido de identidad propio, pero en diálogo con el resto del mundo, propiciar la valoración de las distintas vertientes culturales que existen en nuestra ciudad, que conviven e interactúan, muchas ancestrales, otras de la época de la colonia, de la República y del actual Estado plurinacional. Y finalmente, promover los procesos creativos, tanto de los profesionales, pero también en el campo del ciudadano. En ese contexto, ¿cuál es un poco el estado que estamos trabajando nosotros actualmente? Que está ligado a algunos objetivos que están adelante en las siguientes 2 diapositivas. Un clic más, por favor. Uno es el tema de los objetivos que estamos trabajando. Hemos venido desarrollando, y por eso entramos al programa de Ciudades Pilotos, el hecho de posicionar lo cultural como pilar del desarrollo. Esto ligado sobre todo a los nuevos objetivos de desarrollo y también a la nueva agenda urbana. Para esto también un segundo objetivo es visibilizar y fortalecer las distintas expresiones y manifestaciones culturales y artísticas que existen en el municipio, pero ligado también a abrirnos al mundo, salir de la cordillera y relacionarnos sobre todo con países de la región, buscando propiciar espacios de circulación y movilidad cultural, no solo a nivel internacional, sino sobre todo a nivel nacional, a través de una visión integral del concepto de culturas, que no solo lo reduzca al ámbito de las artes, sino a una amplitud más de creación del ser humano, buscando espacios de diálogo intercultural, que es el hecho de reconocer la diferencia, pero interactuar y tratar de construir nuevas acciones a partir de esta interacción, y el tema de la interdisciplinariedad, que consideramos que es fundamental, sabiendo que entre diferentes podemos construir mayores cosas. En ese contexto hemos
Quedan 3 minutos, Andrés.
Gracias. Generamos un esquema de intervención. Me lo pasas la filmina, por favor, Jordi. que está ligado a asumir una concepción más andina de algunos conceptos que hemos utilizado, que es la lógica de crear un jiwasa, un nosotros, que está ligado a 4 componentes de intervención. El primero es el TAIPI, que significa puntos de encuentro, donde se trabaja para generar una agenda, un programa cultural que haga de La Paz un espacio de encuentro, interacción a nivel nacional. El APTAPI, que es una práctica y un concepto de compartir, donde se generan espacios de discusión, reflexión y debate. El AINI, que es la acción comunal, el trabajo colaborativo, donde desarrollamos proyectos estratégicos, fondos concursables, intervenciones humanas mucho más grandes en coordinación con los actores culturales, y el Untasinani, que significa conocernos, que es este relacionamiento y este accionar a nivel internacional. Los marcos que estamos trabajando es la Ley Municipal Autonómica de Culturas, que tenemos la única en Bolivia, que ha generado un porcentaje del 3.5% del presupuesto para los programas culturales. Tenemos un plan estratégico de culturas que se está proyectando a 5 años para poder implementar a través de una validación de los actores culturales en la línea de aportar a la consecución de los objetivos de desarrollo sostenible y apoyar lo que es la nueva agenda urbana. En ese contexto, en la siguiente filmina podemos ver 4 áreas de priorización: la recuperación y valoración patrimonial a través de la intervención de conjuntos patrimoniales, el potenciamiento de algunos espacios patrimoniales específicos, no solo materiales, sino que tienen que ver también con la parte intangible y material, la dinamización e implementación de corredores culturales para generar dinámicas y apropiación de la población hacia el patrimonio, y la recuperación de la memoria histórica de saberes ancestrales y diálogo intercultural, por ejemplo, con relación a la medicina intercultural. Con relación a la democratización y desconcentración del hecho cultural, que es un segundo ámbito, estamos con varios fondos concursables que generamos. Son fondos que no existen en Bolivia y solo La Paz ha logrado generar, al igual que otros países, que buscan democratizar y transparentar el acceso de los actores culturales hacia los recursos públicos. Se trabaja en el componente de formación con los ciudadanos, no para formar en artes, sino desde las artes formar ciudadanos interculturales, generar distintos espacios alternativos para que las familias puedan pasar tiempo de calidad, y el programa de economías culturales y creativas. Aquí quiero hacer énfasis: no hablamos de industrias creativas y culturales, sino de economías, porque consideramos que desde el sector cultural hay otro tipo de prácticas más allá de las que son características del capitalismo, que generan esta dinámica de intercambio, de acción colaborativo, que son importantes también de valorizar y promover desde lo cultural al resto de la sociedad. El tercer ámbito de intervención es la mejora de infraestructura en distintos
Último
ámbitos.
minuto, Andrés.
Y la cuarta es el tema del fortalecimiento institucional, ¿no? Ligado al tema de generación de normativa, trabajar con el concepto de gestión responsable, que es lo que marca nuestra gestión, mejora de distintos servicios que generamos nosotros y relacionamiento internacional.
No sé qué pasó, pero se silenció tu micrófono, Andrés.
Lo cortaste. Está bien. Solo terminando, Jordi, quisiéramos solo terminar con algunas reflexiones que estarían en las 2 filminas siguientes, por favor. Importante para nosotros es el tema de incorporar la mirada y la sensibilidad artística en el desarrollo urbano. Un segundo reto es generar puentes de interacción intergeneracionales, intersectoriales, asumir lenguajes contemporáneos recuperando la simbología propia, generar ambientes de confianza, transparencia y acceso a la información, tener una mirada local interrelacionada a lo nacional, pero también internacional, y trabajar desde lo cultural la consecución de los nuevos objetivos de desarrollo sostenible y la nueva agenda urbana. Por otro lado,
se silenció otra vez el micrófono.
sí, hay algo, creo que tú desde la administración me sale que tú me muteas.
Sí,
pero
yo paso la diapositiva y automáticamente se mutea tu presentación. Disculpas porque es el bicho este del Zoom que al clicar una vez hace 2 funciones que no tienen nada que ver la una con la otra. Disculpas.
Sí, solo terminando con estas 2 filminas, solo es el tema de nosotros estamos procurando que el servidor público sea un agitador cultural, dejando atrás las visiones paternalistas, generar espacios de encuentro y proyectos de interacción entre distintos saberes, el dar sostenibilidad a las políticas culturales, sobre todo a través de la apropiación de parte de la población, no solo formar desde las artes, sino a partir de las artes y recuperar el espacio público como el ciudadano. Eso sería más o menos mi presentación, Johnny, para mantener un poquito en los tiempos.
Muy bien, gracias Andrés, gracias por el esfuerzo de síntesis. La verdad es que escuchándote y leyendo la presentación y viéndola, siento mucho orgullo de haber trabajado contigo como una ciudad piloto de nuestra red. Los resultados que estáis obteniendo los vamos a difundir en una conferencia que aprovecho para decir que pues, va a ser bien pronto. La estamos trabajando contigo, Andrés, y con Antoine Guibert, que es el experto que hemos destacado para apoyaros. Y sé que han quedado algunas cosas en el tintero, pero las dejamos para el conversatorio, para el debate final. Tatiana, directora de Cultura de San José de Costa Rica, tienes la palabra en los próximos 10 minutos. Adelante. ¿Estás muteada? No, no funciona el micrófono. Continúa sin funcionar.
¿Me escuchan? ¿Ahora sí?
Ahora sí.
Perdón. No, que decía que, bueno, primero saludarte a vos, Jordi, Andrés, un gusto volver a verte a la distancia, Paulo, mucho gusto, y bueno, a todas las personas que están conectadas en esta sesión esta tarde. Bueno, aquí estoy desde San José, Costa Rica, desde Centroamérica, compartiendo un poco lo que estamos trabajando en estas circunstancias pandémicas, ¿verdad? Estamos transitando, como todos los demás países, en medio de un momento importante donde estamos reinventando nuestra labor y nuestro trabajo, pero coyunturalmente nos pasó que la situación pandémica entró justo en un proceso importantísimo de nosotros como ciudad, donde estábamos en la actualización de nuestra política cultural y tuvimos que dar un salto cuántico, digo yo, ¿verdad? Donde todo el planeamiento de trabajo que teníamos, que era justamente para hacer un trabajo consultivo presencial, de actividades y dinámicas y co-creativas, participando a diferentes organizaciones, pues hemos tenido que hacerlo a través de estos medios virtuales. Pero quizás para profundizar un poco más en quiénes somos y qué hace esta pequeña ciudad de San José anclada en Centroamérica, quiero compartirles un pequeño video, así que voy a tomar el control de la pantalla compartida. Por favor me indican si todo corre bien. Y voy a compartirles en este momento un pequeño video de nuestra labor de la ciudad de San José. Ahora sí lo escuchan.
Tampoco.
San José, Costa Rica, 44.72 kilómetros cuadrados.
Muy bajo, pero se escucha.
Donde conviven aproximadamente 337,000 habitantes. Un lugar vivo y lleno de historia que enfrenta sus desafíos trabajando para alcanzar el desarrollo sostenible mediante la creatividad, las redes colaborativas, la tecnología y la organización ciudadana. Tenemos el potencial creativo y las herramientas para diseñar la ciudad que nos gustaría habitar, en la que queremos convivir. Tomando como base la investigación, la creatividad y el diseño, podemos identificar problemáticas para co-crear soluciones viables y sostenibles que tengan un impacto positivo en nuestro entorno. Somos San José Ciudad Creativa. Trabajamos en la postulación de la capital como Ciudad Creativa del Diseño en la red de ciudades creativas de UNESCO. Estamos sumando esfuerzos para diseñar y ejecutar proyectos que impacten positivamente en la ciudad y fortalezcan esta postulación, poniendo el capital creativo local e internacional al servicio de nuestro amado Chaves. San José tiene todo para convertirse en una ciudad creativa, organizada, innovadora, inteligente, colaborativa y sostenible. Trabajemos por esta designación y transformemos San José.
Bien, como ciudad hemos venido trabajando desde hace años en una política cultural que ha venido articulándose con diferentes actores, tanto de la empresa privada, otras organizaciones, ONG o artistas independientes. El año pasado hicimos este proceso de candidatura para ser denominados San José Ciudad Creativa del Diseño por la UNESCO, tuvimos la designación, lo cual nos alegra muchísimo porque realmente nuestro trabajo como ciudad ha sido el de ser este centro realmente articulador y estamos en este proceso de poder seguir trabajando de manera articulada con otras contrapartes. Estamos en este momento rediseñando nuestras actividades, estamos pasando hacia un mundo más virtual y dejando un poco lo presencial. Sin embargo, creemos que esto es una oportunidad también como ciudad porque nos da la posibilidad de articular con otras personas de otras ciudades de este país. También nos da la posibilidad de llevar más allá nuestras labores y nuestras acciones como ciudad. Hemos tenido realmente como ciudad un reto muy grande. Nosotros somos un país pequeño y bueno, ya vieron, la población de nuestra ciudad ronda los 300,000 personas. Sin embargo, nosotros tenemos un tránsito diario en condiciones normales de 1 millón de personas por nuestra ciudad y nosotros albergamos casi el 70% de los centros culturales de nuestro país. Entonces, realmente la actividad cultural de Costa Rica está muy centralizada en nuestra ciudad de San José. Tenemos muchísimos centros culturales, tenemos muchísimas organizaciones y empresarios y emprendedores que trabajan en nuestra ciudad, no necesariamente habitan en nuestra ciudad y eso nos pone retos realmente importantes. Ha sido una coyuntura sumamente interesante, como decía, esta situación pandémica, porque realmente hemos intentado trabajar en diálogo y en construcción y en consulta con distintos actores para poder hacer nuestra actualización de nuestra política cultural, que es una de las cosas que más nos interesa en este momento. Fuimos pioneros dentro de nuestro país, tuvimos nuestra política cultural como municipio antes que una política de Estado sobre derechos culturales, por ejemplo. Nuestra política cultural data del 2013 y bueno, estamos a las puertas de esta actualización de nuestra política y creemos que esta situación pandémica justamente viene a poner sobre la mesa algunos factores que son importantes de valorar con miras a nuestro futuro como ciudad. Algo que también creemos importante como ciudad de San José es que realmente los espacios públicos son espacios necesarios de recuperar, son vitales para nuestra construcción de ciudadanía, son vitales para nuestra dinámica como ciudad, como cultura viva y creemos realmente en los principios que están planteados y coincidimos profundamente en los principios que están planteados en la Carta de Roma 2020, ¿verdad? Donde estamos hablando de justamente descubrir nuestro patrimonio, crear nuestro espacio, compartir nuestras dinámicas, poder disfrutar de nuestra cultura y de nuestro acervo cultural y proteger sobre todo y ante todo este acervo. Y creo que este es el reto más grande que tenemos en este momento, ¿verdad? Donde las circunstancias económicas realmente son apremiantes para todos los países del mundo y bueno, aquí en Latinoamérica y en Centroamérica específicamente las situaciones políticas, económicas, realmente se vuelven también complejas y aquí es donde justamente tenemos que sacar con más fuerza nuestra articulación como sector creativo, cómo podemos co-crear nuestro espacio, cómo podemos reactivar nuestra economía creativa. Hay un sector sumamente golpeado en nuestro país, que es un sector que siempre hemos sido muy conocidos por ello, que es el turístico, ¿verdad? Costa Rica es un destino turístico muy conocido, pero lo cierto es que el sector cultural está transitando por un momento bastante complejo. Sin embargo, es interesante porque en este proceso consultivo que hemos estado en la construcción de nuestra política, de nuestra actualización de nuestra política cultural, hay una gran disposición de los sectores justamente por articularse, cosa que a veces nos ha costado en otros parámetros o en otras plataformas o en otros contextos. Y esta situación pandémica nos ha traído a juntarnos y a encontrarnos de una manera más dinámica. Voy a compartir un pequeño video de una acción que hicimos en el marco de un festival importantísimo que tenemos aquí en Costa Rica, que es Transitarte. Hicimos una puesta en valor justamente con el tema de poner en valor nuestro patrimonio y nuestro acervo cultural y tuvimos una pequeña experiencia en el marco de este festival para poder recrear una casa cónica, que es una casa cósmica que nosotros, nuestros indígenas de Talamanca trabajan de manera ancestral y la trajimos a la ciudad de San José para que la gente tuviera la experiencia de compartirla y quisiéramos también compartirles un poco esta vivencia y este acercamiento con nuestra dinámica como ciudad.
Hola, estamos en Chepe, en el Parque España, muy emocionados de inaugurar Casa Cósmica en el marco de la 15ª edición del Transitar.
Sí, estamos súper felices porque en estos 3 días tenemos toda la oferta cultural que tiene San José. Tenemos cine, gastronomía, música, diseño y estamos todos aquí conviviendo en espacio público, accesible para toda la gente. Entonces, esto es una ciudad creativa. Acompáñenos a ver Chepe.
Generalmente está con actividades artísticas, gastronómicas, exposiciones, trabajo en vivo, digamos, de los artistas también.
I've been here about 30 minutes, but I enjoyed it so far. The people watching is great. No complaints.
Chepe y somos creativos y tiene demasiada esencia. O sea lo que sea que hagamos, tiene demasiada esencia.
Music, live, DJs, art, colorful people.
Bueno, Jordi, y no sé cómo voy con el tiempo, con el atraso que tuve.
Puedes tener un minuto más.
Encuentro que justamente está enmarcado en crear y disfrutar, y yo creo que es parte de lo que nos tiene que mantener con el espíritu en alto y con la visión clara de dónde deberíamos direccionar nuestros esfuerzos como gobiernos locales, en la articulación con otras instituciones, contrapartes, artistas locales, gestores, productores, para realmente poder posicionar en medio de esta situación pandémica con fuerza el valor de los aportes culturales y artísticos de nuestras ciudades, porque realmente es lo que nos puede sostener y nos puede ayudar a buscar salidas y opciones a esta situación tan crítica que estamos transitando como país y como ciudades en el mundo. Entonces realmente yo quisiera quedarme con el espíritu del nombre de este encuentro, que es crear y disfrutar, que es lo que estamos tratando de hacer desde nuestra ciudad, desde nuestra pequeña ciudad de 300,000 y pico de habitantes, y que quisimos compartir brevemente en este espacio de 10 minutos con ustedes, y agradecer por supuesto el espacio en este foro y felicitar por este gran trabajo y este gran esfuerzo de estos días de encuentro, que realmente es maravilloso, y que ojalá podamos seguir compartiendo nuestras experiencias y nuestras realidades, que son muy distintas, pero que al final de cuentas lo que nos cruza es el mismo objetivo, que es seguir trabajando por nuestra cultura en nuestras ciudades. Muchísimas gracias.
Gracias, Tatiana. Vamos a continuar sin duda. Tu alcalde es copresidente de Ciudades y Gobiernos Locales Unidos. Es uno de los de las 5 personas que copresiden nuestra organización, y deseamos mucha suerte a tu dirección en los trabajos de la nueva estrategia cultural, del nuevo plan cultural. Nosotros hemos aprendido mucho con tu presentación y, en fin, la idea es que sin duda pues, también San José pueda inspirarse en el trabajo de la Carta de Roma y en el resto de ponentes. Nosotros estamos a la disposición para ayudar. Hemos aprendido de tu presentación, y en los últimos años hemos aprendido mucho de Santa Fe, porque ha sido una de nuestras ciudades piloto. El trabajo de Santa Fe ha sido espectacular. Ha contado con nuestro apoyo, y en los próximos 10 minutos pues tenemos al secretario de Cultura, a Paulo, para que nos explique, pues en este contexto de crear y disfrutar, como has remarcado muy bien, has recordado muy bien, Tatiana, que es el de esta mesa, para que nos explique pues el plan que tiene en su administración para los próximos años, el impacto de la pandemia, en general, pues los ecos que la Carta de Roma tiene en la política cultural de Santa Fe. Paulo, tienes la palabra.
Bueno, ante todo, muchísimas gracias por invitarnos, por permitirnos participar. Quiero saludar a Andrés, a Tatiana y a Jordi muy especialmente por compartir este espacio, que en estos tiempos de tanto aislamiento, pero a la vez de tanta conexión, son muy enriquecedores, muy gratificantes, y son las mejores maneras que encontramos para salir adelante con ideas compartidas, con experiencias compartidas y con estrategias también comunes. Yo voy a tratar de hacer un repaso breve. Nosotros asumimos como nueva gestión local, municipal, en diciembre pasado, y si bien gran parte del equipo que tomamos a cargo la Secretaría de Educación y Cultura veníamos de trabajar en el Ministerio de Innovación y Cultura de la provincia de Santa Fe, o sea, a nivel estadual, nos encontramos, obviamente, como bien decía Jordi, con una ciudad, que es nuestra ciudad también, que tenía una trayectoria, que tiene una trayectoria muy pujante y muy activa y muy creativa en todos los sentidos de su vida cultural y educativa. La experiencia como ciudad piloto que ha transitado Santa Fe en estos últimos años permitió el fortalecimiento muy claro de las empresas de base creativa, de los emprendimientos, tanto del diseño como emprendimientos de base cultural, que han logrado instalar en el ecosistema, digamos, cultural y también en la economía regional de la ciudad de Santa Fe una serie de hitos y de circuitos de comercialización, producción y circulación de sus bienes culturales muy, muy interesante. Por otro lado, la participación muy activa que Santa Fe ha tenido y que celebramos en los últimos años en todas las redes de ciudades, en la red de ciudades creativas y en Mercociudades, entre otras tantas, creo que ha fortalecido la visibilidad y a la vez las estrategias innovadoras que Santa Fe ha puesto en funcionamiento para el enriquecimiento de este ecosistema cultural y emprendedor de la ciudad. En nuestro caso particular, y por venir también de una tradición muy importante y muy fuerte en el gobierno provincial, en el gobierno estadual, a lo largo de los últimos 12 o 13 años, queremos poner el énfasis en 2 o 3 cuestiones que nos parecen que pueden ser enriquecedoras de esta importante tradición que Santa Fe ya tiene, en desarrollo cultural, en desarrollo creativo y en desarrollo de lo que nosotros llamamos las pedagogías culturales. En primer lugar, nos interesa mucho trabajar sobre la descentralización de las políticas culturales públicas. Algo de eso señalaban Andrés y Tatiana. Santa Fe es una ciudad de 500.000 habitantes, pero es la sexta o séptima ciudad de la Argentina, está entre las 10 ciudades más importantes, pero Argentina tiene ciudades megalópolis, digamos, como Buenos Aires, que entre la ciudad propiamente de Buenos Aires y el conurbano suma más de 13 millones de habitantes, tanto Rosario como Córdoba, que son ciudades de más de 1,5 millones de habitantes, o el Gran Mendoza o el Gran Salta. En ese segundo o tercer nivel es donde se ubica Santa Fe, pero es una ciudad que tiene una tradición cultural muy, muy profunda, muy rica, tal es así que durante la década del 60 se la llevó a conocer como la Atenas del Plata o la Atenas del Paraná, por la cantidad de experiencias innovadoras, como la Escuela de Cine Documental creada en el año 57 o 58, como las escuelas y las asociaciones artísticas y literarias que salieron de la ciudad de Santa Fe. Nosotros creemos que también esa concentración de las ofertas culturales públicas y privadas que se visibilizan en las grandes ciudades y que se da también como desequilibrio entre las ciudades centrales y las ciudades más periféricas, como es el caso de la ciudad de Santa Fe, se reproduce a escala dentro de nuestras propias ciudades, y hay una cantidad muy grande de infraestructuras culturales y de ofertas formativas, de espacios de representación, de espacios de consumo cultural, en lo que se llama en la ciudad de Santa Fe el casco céntrico o la zona de entre bulevares, que nosotros queremos democratizar y llevar hacia distintos sectores de la ciudadanía y de la población que no cuentan con el beneficio de tener tan accesibles las herramientas culturales. Es por eso que pusimos en funcionamiento, yo hoy estoy hablándoles a ustedes desde donde es históricamente la sede de la Secretaría de Cultura, que es una vieja estación de trenes del tren Belgrano, abandonada a mediados de la década del 90 y recuperada por la cultura, y ese es el caso de muchas de infraestructuras culturales con las que cuenta la ciudad de Santa Fe, que son viejas infraestructuras vinculadas al modelo de acumulación imperante a principios del siglo XX, viejos molinos, viejos talleres ferroviarios, viejas estaciones de trenes enormes y abandonadas durante más de 20 años, que la cultura fue recuperando primero por una acción de visibilización casi performática de muchos artistas que hicieron instalaciones, intervenciones de las artes escénicas o de las artes visuales, y después vinieron los estados, tanto el estado municipal como el estado provincial, pero también la Universidad Nacional del Litoral, que tiene su sede principal en la ciudad de Santa Fe, a recuperar esos espacios y ponerlos en valor precisamente para la cultura. Hoy nuestro liceo municipal de la ciudad de Santa Fe, donde hay 5 escuelas de arte distintas, funciona en un ex molino harinero. Esta es una vieja estación de trenes enorme que, por decisión del actual intendente de nuestra ciudad, ahora pasó a depender de la Secretaría de Educación y Cultura, y nosotros estamos presentando un plan estratégico de 17 estaciones en 17 barrios, en 17 distritos de la ciudad de Santa Fe, donde se van a replicar en distintos espacios públicos ya en funcionamiento o a recuperar el modelo de programación, formación y capacitación cultural que estamos aplicando en estos espacios ya hace unos años. Eso en primer lugar. Esto conecta con otra de las variables y de los ejes principales de nuestra gestión, que tiene que ver con la recuperación del espacio público para la cultura y el humano. Nosotros partimos de la convicción de que la recuperación y la puesta en valor de los espacios públicos para la cultura, como también mencionaba Tatiana y Andrés, son herramientas de integración, herramientas de igualación o democratización de la cultura. También son una herramienta invaluable en esta tarea de descentralización de la oferta cultural y de las herramientas. Hablamos también en algunos de nuestros programas de la redistribución de las herramientas culturales o de la redistribución de la belleza, llegar a los distintos territorios de nuestra ciudad de Santa Fe con una oferta cultural que ponga en valor de la misma manera y que llegue con las mismas herramientas de calidad artística, cultural y pedagógica o educativa que los que se ofrecen en las infraestructuras culturales tradicionales, que están naturalmente ubicadas en los cascos históricos y en las zonas de mayor y social y cultural de la ciudad, que siempre son los cascos céntricos o los cascos comerciales. Y por otro lado, por la integración que se tomó como decisión en esta nuestra nueva gestión de integrar a la Secretaría de Educación con la Secretaría de Cultura, eso significa que varios organismos, como el Liceo Municipal que yo recién les mencionaba, y sobre todo el sistema de educación inicial que tiene la ciudad de Santa Fe. La educación inicial es la que va de los 45 días a los 3 años en la República Argentina por la Ley Nacional de Educación, ha quedado bajo la órbita de esta Secretaría, y nosotros, para darle también alcance a esa decisión política que tomó el actual intendente Jatón, decidimos desarrollar todo un programa de pedagogías culturales, en donde se interrelaciona las políticas de cuidado, las políticas educativas, las políticas formativas y las pedagogías que ya existían bajo la órbita de los organismos municipales, se ponen en relación directa con todo el sistema de organismos culturales públicos, los programas de formación pública, las orquestas infantiles, los elencos teatrales, los distintos organismos culturales, teatros, mercados. Santa Fe tiene 3 o 4 mercados, viejos mercados también de productos frescos, de comestibles, que habían sido abandonados y que fueron también recuperados por los estados para la cultura o para instancias formativas, en donde conviven instancias de feria de diseño con instancias de ferias también de alimentos y gastronómicas, y nosotros buscamos integrar a la cultura en todo ese circuito, pero como decía recién, también apostamos a la integración de las primeras infancias como sujetos de ciudadanía, no solamente como sujetos beneficiarios de las políticas de cuidado, formativas del gobierno local, del gobierno municipal, sino también como ciudadanas y ciudadanos, los niños de esas primeras infancias, que son sujetos también de nuestras políticas culturales públicas, y eso es naturalmente una consecuencia de toda una dinámica que desde el Estado Provincial de Santa Fe, entre el año 2007 y el año 2015, se puso en funcionamiento, que tenía que ver con la recuperación y la creación de muchos espacios culturales que tenían y tienen a la primera infancia como sus principales públicos y como sus principales protagonistas. Hay una idea del ciudadano como protagonista, no solamente la gestión cultural pública priorizando el lugar de los artistas o de los que se están formando en los distintos lenguajes y disciplinas artísticas, sino fundamentalmente el ciudadano como protagonista de la vida cultural de la ciudad, y en particular la primera infancia, que en muchos casos, y por las durísimas crisis, primero económica y ahora pandémica, que está sufriendo la Argentina como todo el mundo, son esas infancias los estratos sociales más vulnerados y más golpeados, y que menos herramientas accesibles, gratuitas, tienen para acceder a la cultura. En este sentido, rescatamos...
Un minuto, Paulo.
Bien, cierro con esto, con una premisa que siempre decía al cierre de sus discursos la que fue durante 12 años ministra de Innovación y Cultura de la ciudad de Santa Fe, Chiqui González, que decía: cuidemos lo público, porque para muchos es lo único, y nosotros, para darle un cierre vinculado con las dos palabras o los dos ejes de esta conversación, de crear y disfrutar, queremos potenciar las capacidades creativas de la ciudadanía de Santa Fe con un Estado que acerque herramientas públicas accesibles y gratuitas para que esas capacidades se desarrollen, y también creemos que en la descentralización de la cultura, en el disfrute de los espacios públicos y en la accesibilidad y desarrollo de los mismos, también se puede garantizar un mayor disfrute, un mayor beneficio para la ciudadanía, en estos tiempos en donde la distancia física termina siendo también sinónimo de una cercanía afectiva, de una empatía con el otro, de una empatía con nuestros vecinos, con nuestros ciudadanos. Creemos que la cultura tiene mucho para hacer, mucho para decir y mucho para enseñarnos sobre cómo los cuerpos y los seres humanos tenemos que aprender de nuevo a estar juntos en el espacio público. Muchas gracias.
Muchas gracias, Paulo. Muchas gracias por la concisión y por la riqueza de tu exposición. Uno de los temas que en la Carta de Roma aparece con claridad, y es una pregunta que quería compartiros pidiéndoos una respuesta pues también muy breve, en 2 minutos cada uno. Uno de los temas, uno de los aspectos más claros que aparece en la Carta de Roma es el tema de los obstáculos. Y esta mesa, de hecho, se titula algo así como Considerando los obstáculos. ¿Lo habéis contestado, lo habéis considerado en vuestras ponencias? Pero quiero hacer la pregunta de manera directa. ¿Cuáles son los 2 o 3 obstáculos mayores que existen en vuestras ciudades para que todo el mundo pueda participar libre y plenamente en la vida cultural? Andrés, si quieres ir tú primero.
Sí, bueno, gracias, Jordi. Yo comenzaría señalando que primero, que es un problema que estamos trazando como país en base un poco a la coyuntura política, es el hecho del reconocimiento al otro como sujeto de derecho. Creo que eso es un problema y un obstáculo que se han generado polarizaciones en la sociedad, donde no se está permitiendo reconocer la diversidad y la potencialidad de la diversidad para el desarrollo. Y eso hace que exista mucha desconfianza, poca valorización o descrédito a las expresiones, formas de concebir la vida de las personas que no forman parte de nuestra estructura, de nuestra matriz cultural específicamente. Una segunda creo que está ligada a esta visión de todavía no concebir el valor y la importancia que tiene la cultura para el desarrollo integral de la sociedad, pero también de las personas. Es decir, asumirlo como un producto de primera necesidad, y en ese sentido asumirlo como un elemento que no tiene que ver solo con la expresión, sino tiene también que ver con el desarrollo integral, y que conlleva una inversión no solo por parte del Estado, sino del ciudadano también, de apostar y generar esta dinámica. Y la tercera, a mi entender, está ligada a esta lógica de profesionalización de las expresiones culturales, donde se quiere reducir al ciudadano a un simple espectador y no reconocer más bien que el ámbito de cultura tiene que ver con la dinámica propia y la propia dinamismo de las sociedades. Y eso conlleva también a comenzar a dejar de ver al ciudadano como un actor pasivo directamente, o como la cultura a lo que solo tiene que desarrollarse en ciertos espacios o en ciertas estructuras tradicionales, y no verlo más bien como una actividad dinámica. Y esto se liga al hecho de la necesidad de tener mayores espacios de encuentro, donde el espacio público, como decía Tatiana, es el factor más importante. Ahí nos relacionamos, y tiene que ver con la devolución de la ciudad al ciudadano, en el sentido de que no sea pensada para vehículos, sea pensada más bien para los individuos que puedan tomar el espacio público, interactuar a partir de él y recrear en esta lógica aspectos y acciones en el marco de esta convivencia y diálogo intercultural.
Gracias, Andrés. En verdad, este tema de los espacios públicos es un tema que en todo el mundo estamos viendo cómo la pandemia sirve para reconquistar espacios o para conquistar espacios públicos. Y quizás es algo que en la Comisión de Cultura de CGLU debamos trabajar un poquito más. En fin, veremos en los próximos días si podemos articular algo en este sentido. Y celebro además que en tu respuesta hayas seguro que no la has podido escuchar esta mañana la conversación porque era en la madrugada de La Paz, pero hemos tenido a primera hora de la mañana aquí en África y en Europa, hemos tenido una sesión plenaria sobre el tema de las desigualdades, y los temas que han aparecido se parecían mucho a lo que tú has aportado ahora, Andrés. Gracias. Tatiana, ¿quieres tú responder a este reto?
Bien, voy a intentar no ser reiterativa, sino complementar lo que ha planteado Andrés, porque creo que hay coincidencia en estos obstáculos que Andrés plantea y que tiene que ver un poco también con esta visión de cómo nos regimos un poco en esta zona del mundo de Latinoamérica. Quizás yo complementaría lo que Andrés plantea como obstáculos, un tema que para nosotros ahorita lo estamos viviendo de manera muy directa, y es el tema de la participación de los creadores en la formulación y en la apropiación de las políticas culturales. No esperar solo de parte de los gobiernos la proposición de estas políticas, sino también cómo ellas toman sentido en el momento en que la ciudadanía y las organizaciones y los creadores y los artistas se apropian de las mismas. Y entender esta construcción colectiva de las políticas culturales es algo que por lo menos acá en Costa Rica nos ha tomado tiempo. Crear ese entretejido, crear ese hilo de co-creación para realmente generar políticas que respondan también, pero también que sea un tema de corresponsabilidad, que Andrés lo decía de alguna manera, ¿verdad? Una participación también desde la responsabilidad en la generación de esta visión política. Entender efectivamente que la inversión de los estados en el campo cultural es una inversión, no un gasto. Quizás es uno también de esos obstáculos conceptuales que nos encontramos, ¿verdad? Realmente entender tanto para el ciudadano como para el empresario, como para los gobiernos locales, como para el gobierno central, como para las diferentes instituciones u ONGs, que la inversión en cultura es realmente crear seres humanos capaces de ser resilientes. Por ejemplo, una situación pandémica como esta nos demuestra lo que las herramientas creativas y culturales le pueden dar a la ciudadanía para sobreponerse a las dificultades, inclusive para reinventarse en medio de estas circunstancias tan complejas económicamente. Entonces, realmente quizás ese sería un segundo punto que sería para mí importante mencionar. Y uno último que no quisiera dejar de decir es el trabajo intergeneracional, porque yo realmente creo mucho en esto, el aporte de las visiones de las distintas generaciones, y quizás tiene que ver un poco con lo que Andrés planteaba, ¿verdad? Del reconocimiento del otro, del respeto hacia el otro, de la escucha hacia la visión del otro, y no solo entre pares, sino también intergeneracionalmente. A veces tenemos una visión demasiado adultocentrista para la resolución de los problemas, y a veces hay un aporte interesante desde otras generaciones, y por lo menos en nuestro caso hemos estado haciendo un trabajo fuerte en donde hemos intentado desde esta actualización de la política participar a todas las partes de la ciudadanía, tanto de los niños, los jóvenes, los adultos, como los adultos mayores. Ampliar esto hacia también la integración total, ¿verdad? A nivel de género también y demás características que nos conforman como humanidad. Pero realmente el diálogo intergeneracional creo que es algo que deberíamos también potenciar, porque a veces nuestra visión puede ser enriquecida por la voz de gente mucho más joven o gente muchísimo más grande, con mayor experiencia, con mayor vida y con mayor visión alrededor de las situaciones y las problemáticas culturales que podríamos estar enfrentando. Creo que con esto concluyo para no extenderme muchísimo más.
No, está bien. Muy, muy clara también tu exposición. Y bueno, entre las muchas de las cosas que has dicho, señalar la precariedad de buena parte del sector cultural, que es algo también que pues, hemos constatado en casi todos los países del mundo, y la necesidad que en los marcos nacionales pues estas condiciones queden muy mejoradas en los próximos meses, que se establezcan los marcos laborales necesarios para que la acción de los profesionales de la cultura pueda continuar como existen marcos adecuados para otro tipo de profesionales y trabajadores que tienen características específicas. Paulo, ¿cuál sería tu aportación en este tema de los obstáculos? Aunque, insisto, reconozco que has hablado de ello en tu ponencia inicial.
Sí, coincidiendo con mucho de lo que señalaban Andrés y Tatiana, y para no repetirnos, ni repetirme yo tampoco, creo que obviamente los obstáculos materiales de la distribución inequitativa, digamos, de muchas de las herramientas de acceso a la cultura es un obstáculo muy grande, pero también están los obstáculos simbólicos, y a veces esos obstáculos simbólicos se ponen de manifiesto cuando, por ejemplo, nuestros propios ciudadanos no sienten o no saben que son propietarios también de muchos de los bienes culturales públicos y transitan. Yo veía la imagen en el video que compartía Tatiana del querido y hermoso Teatro Nacional de San José de Costa Rica. Nosotros tenemos también un coliseo que el lunes está cumpliendo 115 años, un gran teatro lírico, y muchos de nuestros conciudadanos pasan por la puerta y no se atreven a entrar, porque sienten que no es de ellos, como si fuera un coliseo privado, digo, y ese trabajo de romper esas barreras simbólicas es también un trabajo que nos parece que le corresponde a la gestión cultural pública, digamos, de señalar, democratizar en términos reales, materiales, las herramientas de acceso a la cultura, pero también la valoración simbólica de que esa cultura es de todos y de todas. Y por otro lado, también trabajar en redes, como yo contaba que lo venimos haciendo, y que en cada una de esas redes en donde queremos ubicar estaciones, nosotros hacemos una convocatoria a la totalidad de las instituciones de ese barrio, de ese distrito, aunque no sean instituciones culturales, por ahí son clubes deportivos, pero que tienen dentro de sí, sin saberlo, una tradición importante de actividades culturales que vienen cobijando durante muchas décadas, y igualmente no se autoperciben como espacios de formación cultural o de expresión cultural ciudadana. Y por otro lado, trabajar en la ruptura de los compartimentos estancos de las disciplinas artísticas en sí mismo, que en Argentina afortunadamente hay una enorme tradición también de sindicalización, representación gremial de esos sectores de la cultura, que tienen cada uno de ellos muchos gremios propiamente que los representan, que pelean por sus derechos, pero eso también ha generado como compartimentos estancos que no se ven a los que tienen al lado, a los que tienen al costado, no los ven tanto como pares, y porque están en otro lenguaje artístico o porque están agrupados en otra disciplina. Nosotros creemos que es también rol del Estado trabajar transversalmente con todos esos colectivos para que se enriquezcan mutuamente y para que formen parte del entramado cultural o de la red, como señalaba Tatiana, que construye la cultura de nuestras ciudades y de nuestras naciones.
Muy bien, muchas gracias. La verdad es que sabe a poco lo que hemos podido escucharos, y me encantaría nos encantaría poder dedicar más tiempo a esta conversación, pero pues la tenemos que dejar aquí porque tenemos otra sesión, a otro grupo de ponentes que va a empezar a compartir y a proteger en los próximos minutos. Gracias, muchas gracias Andrés, muchas gracias Tatiana, muchas gracias Paulo. Continuamos el diálogo online a la mínima oportunidad y continuamos conectados sin duda en el trabajo que estamos haciendo. Gracias.
Hello, Mercedes. Hello, Fiona. Pleased to meet you both.
Hello. Can you hear me well?
Yes.
Hi.
Can you hear me?
Can hear you very well, Ariel.
Good.
Very nice to meet you. And you, Mercedes?
Likewise.
Hi, nice to see you both. I wasn't sure whether I could put my sound on, so I
wasn't sure either, but I just thought it would be nice just to say hello.
Mercedes?
Hey.
Hi. Am I going first then, after your introduction?
Yes, you are.
Yep, as it appears on the agenda.
As it appears on the agenda, my dear. I will introduce you, set the session, give you the floor. Fiona, you first, and then Ariel. Ariel, am I pronouncing it right? Ariel?
Ariel like the mermaid.
Okay, Ariel. And then we will go into, a couple of questions to each of you, okay? Based on what I have seen of the two themes of the session. So let's play it by ear and, feel free. It's
yeah,
it's
okay. I'm just going to try and share my screen because I haven't been able to. Aha, now I'm getting a message from support here. I'll just reply to
Fiona, it's Winders or Winders? How do you pronounce your last name? Winders. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I'm getting a message from support here.
I don't have a PowerPoint. I'm a bit all teched out.
That's fine.
I don't blame you.
Hello, Jordi.
Hello, Ariel. Hello, Fiona.
Hello, good
Hello,
afternoon.
Jordi. Nice
Hello,
to see
Mercedes.
you.
Good to see you. I think that we can get started.
Everybody seeing us? Yeah. Jordi, you give me the, green light.
Welcome all to this final session of today's conference on the 2020 Rome Charter. The session is devoted to the way out of inequalities, devoted to protect and share. Before the session is conducted by Mercedes Giovinazzo, let me kindly ask that you write your name and family name in the image showing your screen. We also invite you to say who you are and eventually the organization you represent at the chat. We also wish to inform you that we are going to record this conversation, and we will use images and sound in promoting the event in our media. And finally, we kindly ask you to mute your microphone and to turn the video off if you're not one of the speakers. If you want to raise questions, please use the chat, and the chair will read the questions and pose the questions to the speakers. Now the floor is for Mercedes to conduct the conversation. Thank you, Mercedes.
Thank you, Jordi. Thank you very, very much for this quick introduction to this session, number 10 within your Global Observatory at the 2020 Rome Charter Conference, which is dedicated to protect and share. It's called Round 3. What can I say, Jordi? Just to thank you, all the organizers, very, very much. I feel privileged and honored to be here today with you. Thank you to the City of Rome and to UCLG Culture Committee for organizing this conference in this complex situation, for taking up the challenge of doing this hybrid version with this complex structure. But I'm sure that it's going to be very, very useful and of course, interesting for all of us. Again, on behalf of myself, Mercedes Giovinazzo, as Director of InterArts, thank you so much. And let's go. I am here this afternoon with two wonderful women, Fiona Winders and Ariel Huang. It's a pleasure to see you, even if it's online. So thank you so much for having, accepted to take up this challenge with me to talk about this idea of protecting and sharing around culture. Fiona, you're in Malmo and Ariel is in Joburg, right? And I'm in Barcelona. I have checked. There's about 2,135 kilometers between Malmo and Barcelona, and 11,400 between Barcelona and Joburg, for a total of 13,500 kilometers. but luckily we're all in the same time zone. So at least, you know, it's not the afternoon here and the morning somewhere else. So, you know, just to give us a picture of the complexity of this conversation, because we're speaking from very, very different, not only perspectives, but again, you know, positions in the geography of the world. Welcome, Fiona Winders. Again, it's a pleasure to have you here. You're British, but you have been living in Sweden for many, 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 many years. You are development coordinator at the Department of Culture of the city of Malmö. And you have an extensive experience within UCLG. If I'm not mistaken, Malmö is one of the leading cities for culture within UCLG. So that's, you know, let's say, a label that you have that makes you a very relevant participant in this conference. And I had the pleasure of, you know, talking to you in the previous rounds of preparation of the Rome Charter. So we've had the, you know, possibility of exchanging views. And currently, if I'm not mistaken, you are in the process of revising the city of Malmö's cultural policy. So I think that your perspective in this specific context will be very relevant and interesting for all of us. So thank you, Fiona, for being with us. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mercedes. Thank you, Jordi. It's very nice to meet you both and to meet Ariel for the first time and to share a platform with you today. Can I say, first of all, what a pleasure it has been to be part of this conference over the last 2 days. I've received so much food for thought, inspiration, really kind of aha moments in the course of the conference. And I think that everybody will probably echo that. And it's going to be a pleasure to see the recap of the conference when we can gather in all this fantastic knowledge and ideas and feel that we are part of a global community, truly, in the promotion of cultural rights. I don't know if my presentation is available.
Fiona, just 1 second. Let me introduce Ariel, okay? And then I'll give you the floor.
Do Ariel first, and then I'll come back to my presentation.
Thank you so much. Ariel, thank you for being with us today. You are based in Johannesburg, but well, you were born in Taiwan. You are a violinist, so a very different profile from Fiona's. I think that you're also an electric violinist, so you have also that specialty. You're young, you have traveled extensively, you have lived in the United States because you're a laureate also of the Sistema Fellowship in the New England Conservatory, and you have lived in Boston many years, you have worked, and if I'm not wrong, it's also there where you started to be interested in the issue of social justice, forgive me, through music education. At a given point in your life, you decided nevertheless to go back to Johannesburg, and you are currently the deputy director of the Johannesburg Youth Orchestra and defining a new plan for the orchestra in this very complex current situation. You have had relationships with UCLG, if I'm not mistaken, because you have participated in an activity that they co-organized with the South African Local Government Association. So welcome. I mean, it's a pleasure to have you here. And before giving you the floor, let me just recap. This is about protect and share, because I think that we have to put the issues into perspective. Protect in the charter is about, and I'm quoting, protecting the city's common cultural resources so that all can benefit from them now and in the future. It is about continuity and legacy in an interdependent world. And it is about, as they say, to cherish and preserve what has been made so that it can be discovered again. I find that, extremely important to keep in mind. And the share part is about, and I quote again, sharing cultures and creativity to enrich social and democratic life. And it is about the right to be there, to be in the life of the city. And it's not only about the value of culture, but the value of what is created and what is done by whomever this might be done and carried out. let's say, the respect of our freedoms and duties as we talk and we mention, you know, from a perspective of, from a rights perspective, in particular, in this case, a human rights perspective. This is the context. Let's go, let's get to work. You have about 10 minutes each. Fiona has a PowerPoint presentation. She will go first. And then Ariel does not have a PowerPoint presentation. So it's also going to be, you know, a diverse session. Please, Fiona, the floor is yours.
Okay. Now I think my presentation is coming up. And yes, it's very lovely to be speaking to you from Malmö this afternoon. As you say, we are a UCLG leading city for culture in this year, the forthcoming year, and we've had that status and are very proud of it since 2016. Next picture, please. Have the next picture. Okay, I'll carry on talking. The pictures will catch up. Malmö is, just to put it in its context, is a city of around about 350,000 residents, but we have 184 different nationalities living in Malmö. It's the port of entry to the Nordic region and the fastest growing city in Sweden, with a very young population. Around about 50% are under the age of 35. So the idea of sharing culture is endemic, really is central to how we are working in Malmö. Take the next picture. The Rome Charter principles of sharing and protecting culture are very much echoed in the cultural strategy of Malmö. We've been very pleased to be part of the discussions in the production of the Rome Charter. And what I would say about our cultural strategy as well, which is quite important, it's not just a culture strategy for the culture department, but is a culture strategy for the whole of the city and involves agreements between the Department of Culture with other departments. That can be city planning, that can be parks and streets, schools, elderly care, and rests on concrete agreements about bringing culture to as much of the city and enabling culture in the city as much as is possible. And we take the next picture, we can see the correlation between the culture strategy of Malmö and the 2020 Rome Charter to make the practice and participation in culture a right for Malmö residents, to reduce disparity between groups. So it's a very much an equities-based strategy, which seeks to balance up, if you like, the inequities in society and in the provision and access to culture, and create platforms and opportunities for groups, minority groups within Malmö, but across groups, to share culture and to reap the benefits of that meeting, which of course is not always friction-free, but is very important and involves all these ideas about opening up institutions to groups, having a debate about the management and meaning of culture, cultural sites and monuments, supporting free speech and expression, and providing conditions in which to participate. We've had a culture strategy from 2014 up till now. We're in the process of taking forward a new culture strategy for 2021 and onwards, and we will be looking towards the Rome Charter, amongst other materials, as an inspiration and a guide for when we will be taking forward that culture strategy. If I can take the next picture, because this is an enormous subject, sharing and protecting, but I'd like to kind of zoom in on an example, which we have many examples in Malmö, but I thought it was kind of interesting to take an example from the recent past about the exhibition in December, started in December and ran through January, by Michael Rakowitz, the Iraqi-American artist, Some of you will be familiar with Michael Rakowitz's work. He is the man who is responsible for one of the fourth plinth artworks in London. He specializes in the reappearance or the reimagining of annihilated objects, ancient buildings, statues, and so on that have been eradicated at the hands of ISIS. But instead of building them up as they were, he uses disposable materials, food packaging, newspapers, wrappings from the Middle East, which people from the diaspora are familiar with, which have come out in the whole world to recreate artistic works. And here in Malmö, he had an exhibition which was done in collaboration with the Iraqi Cultural Association of Malmö, whose members both opened the exhibition, acted as guides during that time, and activity leaders, and shared their stories as part of the Iraqi diaspora around the theme of objects that have been destroyed or looted or plundered, not only in the recent past, but also in the longer past by museums and art institutions of the Western world. So it was, if you like, bringing up all of that issue about all the questions around the right to culture, the memory of culture, the robbing of culture, which was a very powerful exhibition, and talks and seminars thematically linked to that on the question of cultural destruction. And one of the things that Michael Rakowitz is interested in is the idea also that Iraq as a country is only seen in much of the world through the prism of war and victimhood and destruction. And what he was trying to show is the rich cultural history, the stories, all of the aspects of Iraqi culture that are often ignored in this narrative of destruction and victimhood. Here in Malmö, we have 11,000 citizens who were born in Iraq. And this was incredibly powerful collaboration between the Iraqi community, the artist Michael Rakowitz, and our institution, Malmö Konsthallen, to make visible and to share all of these both joyous but also painful aspects of the development of Iraq's history in the near past and the not so near past. Now, I'm hoping that we're going to be able to show a very small clip from the film about Michael Rakowitz, and we're going to start at 8 minutes 40, if it's able to be shared, this film, where he speaks himself about this process. Do we have it? Yeah, I think there's a problem with the sound. We have no sound?
Simultaneously for the person that is in this kind of palimpsest of removals that has happened, that it's very easy for the West to look at videos from 2015 to see the destruction caused by groups like ISIS, and to see it in a vacuum, and to see it labeled according to a kind of redaction or an iconoclast against idolatry. But in fact, one needs to also understand that these are being destroyed because of the way in which the West elevates these objects, and elevates the value of these objects, and dismisses the value of the people that perish alongside them. And so bringing this to Malmö was a way of being able to kind of reappear for different parts of the community, these ghosts. And ghosts will do two things simultaneously. For the person that is intended to be haunted by the ghost, to create discomfort. For the person who misses the entity that has become the ghost, it can't provide comfort. And so what I'm very interested in is this banquet hall, this former room G, which is the designation the archaeologists gave to this room, was a place where the king received the subjects of Assyria, and it's where banquets happen. And it can be seen as a place where joy could be activated. And it is one of those places that I think will be a living and breathing room for the different citizens of Bulawayo, that you come in and you see this reappearance, and it's in the vibrant colors that it might have been in antiquity. But those colors are provided by the wrappers of Middle Eastern foodstuffs and the Arabic English newspapers that one finds in Chicago, where there are Arab communities that are fleeing places that they come from. And it becomes this, not just fragments of cultural visibility that are being listed to make these things in a moment visible, but they are also evidence of survival, of life continuing. And one thing I'll never forget is that at this moment that the exhibition was inaugurated, the Councillor had actually cultivated this relationship with the Iraqi Cultural Association here in Melbourne. And they came and they became hosts, whether you liked it or not. They were able to actually mobilize their agency as hosts in this space and inaugurated the exhibition with hundreds of people in this room. I don't even know if the Kingdom of Syria had this many people in the room at any one time. And the Iraqi joy that was activated in this room for me was the best form of protest against the dehumanization of their people that I've seen. And to also know that in that space of sweetness are these gaps that are left open. Most of these walls are not adorned because what you see in front of you are the things that have been destroyed. And what you don't see in front of you, these empty spaces with accession cards, tell you that those objects were removed from the Northwest Palace and reside in those Western collections. So you're seeing many different things at once. You're seeing also the gaps through which the Iraqi people have been forced to see their history since the West decided to value it. And one of the things that keeps coming up for me is when I look at these reliefs and I see them on the walls and I see the fact that 400 of the 600 that were in that palace are actually in the West in these different collections. I think about those 200 that were destroyed by ISIS in 2015. And I know that if ISIS were to tell the international community that there are 200 reliefs here that are going to be destroyed unless you take them, the West would have opened up all the museums to receive them. But if that same group said there are 200 citizens that we're going to kill here next to the Northwest Palace of Midland, the borders would stay closed. So for me, it becomes that sweet and sour moment where flavors do get held in tension, where you can experience the immense beauty of an object, but also understand that you can never untie the fate of that object from the fate of the people that live alongside them.
Not sure. I'm not too sure about the quality of the sound on that, but I've posted up the YouTube link for those of you who would like to look, because I think this is a very good example of sharing and that you can go and have a look at. As well as we can go to the next picture, the last picture in my presentation. Maybe we can. Thank you, Martha. We take picture number 7. Thank you. I would also say, just to, of course, we have a lot of work going on in Malmö around these issues, that we have been a member of the International City as Refuge Network since 2010, as well as PEN, and we provide residency programs to threatened artists from around the world. Recently, We've opened a new library, the David Isaak Library. David Isaak is a Swedish Eritrean journalist who has been held prisoner in Eritrea for the last 15 years. And this is a library for the whole world to be able to send to us, and we will keep and look after internationally threatened writing and music. So to act as a repository for protecting cultural rights and protecting the freedom of expression in the world. And then what we see as fairly normal and simple and effective measures to make sure that all of the major migrant languages in Malmö can have access to literature through being part of what's called Världens Bibliotek, the world's library. And these are some of the smaller and larger ways in which we are looking to share and protect culture and cultural rights in Malmö. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you so much, Fiona. Thank you so much. Indeed, I am afraid that the sound with the video was a bit, the quality was not, excellent, but thank you for sharing the link. I'll come back to you with a couple of questions afterwards, but let me give the floor to Ariel now for her presentation. Ariel, the floor is yours, forgive me.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Mercedes and Fiona, and to the conference delegates. And thank you, Fiona, for your fascinating presentation. I've just added Malmö to my travel bucket list for when we're allowed to travel again. And thank you to the City of Rome and the UCLG Committee on Culture for the invitation to be on this panel, as well as all of the hard work for the behind the scenes staff. I was invited to join some colleagues last month to dialogue on the Rome Charter and its resonances for policy and practices in South Africa. So I'm delighted to meet new colleagues and new friends today to dive deeper into 2 of the 5 capabilities of protect and share. And for today's session, I'd like to share 3 dimensions of my work at the local, national, and international level, connecting protect and share with raising the next generation of young creatives. As mentioned, I'm the Deputy Director of the Johannesburg Youth Orchestra Company. I was a student member of the orchestra in the 90s, went back as faculty in the mid-2000s, and started serving as Deputy Director last year, my main responsibilities being the fiscal and operational health of the organization. To give you some context, Johannesburg is the biggest city in South Africa with some 5.5 million inhabitants. Nicknamed the City of Gold, Joburg, as the locals call it, began as a gold mining settlement in 1886 and is considered to be the country and the continent's economic capital. It also contains one of the largest African immigrant populations. Joburg is both a cultural and educational hub of South Africa. The country itself has a population of 58 million people, of which 20.4 million are the youth between the ages of 14 to 34. Approximately 8.2 million of the youth are not in employment, education, or training of any sort. With our complex history and segregate laws, South Africa has the highest rate of inequality in the world. Despite our young democracy, with Nelson Mandela being our first democratically elected president in 1994, South Africa's arts sector has been recognized worldwide for our vast and revolutionary talent, fueled with a well-pronounced history of activism to fight these inequalities. And understanding the state of the arts and culture in South Africa, it is important to mention the alien economy the arts and culture operate in. Against this backdrop, Johannesburg Youth Orchestra Company was formed in 1998 in response to the closure of government music centers. It is a city-based organization which has grown from 1 to 12 different ensembles and music groups, providing a musical home for over 300 children, representing 50 schools, education institutions, and community music groups. The mission of the Johannesburg Youth Orchestra Company is to develop youth through music, providing social, personal, and artistic growth, building communities through joint participation in music initiatives, redressing inequities, responding to educational and musical needs by providing access to music education and training for youth from all communities. We know that arts and culture participation is a key factor in human and social development. I'd now like to pivot to the national level. The whole of South Africa was placed under lockdown from March due to COVID-19, and all live cultural arts and activities were completely halted. The sector shutdown is expected to reduce South Africa's GDP directly and indirectly by close to $6 billion this year. A virtual movement comprised of arts and cultural practitioners grew on Facebook to comprise of some 18,000 members and was recently formalized into a civil society organization called I'm for the Arts. A winter school was organized by local arts and culture experts and practitioners to share knowledge and experience in an attempt to pave the way forward. I was elected as the convener of the Cultural Policy Working Group, and together we're examining and interrogating legislation affecting the arts and culture industries, particularly in the efforts of economic and social recovery from the pandemic. The organization is comprised of elected national officials, provincial representatives, and thematic working groups such as arts education, sustainability, advocacy and lobbying, and capacity building. For the Arts aims to be a united voice to address the revival of the arts and culture creative industries of this country. Moving to the international level, I also serve as the Director of Leadership and Learning for Creative Generation, an international NGO working to inspire, connect, and amplify the work of young creatives who catalyze social change and those who are committed to cultivating their creativity. Allow me to share a few key areas of our work. The Campaign for Creative Generation is a global campaign working to ensure that the next generation reaches their full potential to solve society's greatest challenges. With intergenerational leaders from around the world, the campaign is dedicated to inspiring, connecting, and amplifying the work of individuals and organizations committed to cultivating the creative capacities of young people. Each year, the campaign identifies a theme which is shared among partners around the globe. Partners receive monthly calls to action, which contribute to a movement being built in communities around the world. In January of this year, we launched a new campaign, Arts and Culture Education as a Fundamental, Civil, and Human Right. Since this launch, we have survived or surviving a global pandemic. We're facing a worldwide recession, and throughout we saw civil uprisings working to dismantle systems of oppression and white supremacy around the globe. And throughout all of this, young creators and their educators stayed centered on the goal to lead through arts and culture in order to envision a new future. Our commitment to the fundamental, civil, and human rights to arts and culture education for every young person remains strong, but we must demonstrate that through action. We also have the Institute for Creative Social Transformation, which works to research, document, and contribute knowledge and understanding to the field of practitioners dedicated to cultivating the creative capabilities of the next generation in order to activate efforts of social transformation and thriving communities and towards more just societies. The Incubator for Creative Impact seeks to activate creative projects, catalyzing social transformation by building local capacity through providing customized technical assistance and a professional learning community of artists, educators, and community activists. The Academy for Creative Leadership works to connect and develop the skills of artists, educators, community organizations, and young people who are catalysts for creative social transformation through the professional learning and signature curricula. Within the Academy, there is a component focusing on the development of leadership within the arts and culture education, and I'm currently designing a fellowship for this Academy. I truly believe the capability of protect and share, and indeed all 5 capabilities, are absolutely crucial, particularly for the youth who are our greatest assets. Prior to lockdown, I was serving as the co-concert master of the KwaZulu-Natal Philharmonic Orchestra, and as much as I miss performing and creating music together, I'm immensely grateful for many unexpected and fruitful collaborations, as well as ideating opportunities this new virtual world has brought us, including, of course, today's session on the Rome Charter to protect and share. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ariel. Thank you for sharing that experience. Thank you for sharing, I would say, your commitment. It's obvious that you're passionately committed to the issue, but you're also very practical about it. And I'm saying this because I will now take these 20 and something, scarce minutes that we have ahead of us. Our boss here has told me that I have until 20 past, more or less. So let's make a maximum of these 20-something minutes ahead. And I will ask you a couple of questions to both of you, the same question regarding the issue of share and protect. I want to do a previous statement before, if you allow me, because this helps me to make my question, orient my question concretely. I had an interesting conversation a couple of days ago with someone very dear to me who does not work in the cultural sector, but because of professional reasons and interests related to his sector, has more and more come into following up what is happening within our sector, the cultural sector. And after participating in a couple of conferences, one on cultural diplomacy and the other one on intercultural dialogue, he asked me, the debates are extremely interesting, and one learns always many, many things from what people share. But I seem to find that there is something lacking, and the something lacking is, are we capable of making concrete proposals as to the issues that preoccupy us, that are at stake, that we're interested in, that are relevant to whatever we're tackling in a given moment? And he told me, I have a feeling that you guys are a sector that sometimes has difficulties in doing this. So having said this, which is sort of provocative because we were having this conversation, I was, wow, yeah, okay, thank you, yes, okay. But having said this, the questions are therefore aimed at having concrete proposals from you both, Fiona and Ariel. As regards to sharing, the issue of sharing, the charter says, the documentation, not the charter necessarily, but the documentation within the charter says, participation in cultural life is possible only when culture is shared. We have had experiences from both of you, Fiona and Ariel, I think, that illustrate this. But could we go a little bit more in depth? Could you expand on this? Could you be concrete, hopefully, in providing us with some perspective from both your experiences as to how we could actually foster support concretely right now, participation through sharing? Thank you. Who wants to take the floor first? Free.
Well, I can just jump in straight away, and maybe Ariel will have some thoughts to add to that. In Malmö at the moment, we are involved in a discussion and a planning, really, for public spaces in the city, to try and ensure that the public spaces of Malmö more accurately reflect and share the different cultures that are in the city. Like many cities in the world, I'm sure that Rome is not an exception, and maybe even not Johannesburg, that there are a lot of old white men on plinths in our public spaces. And of course, over the last 6 months, we've seen a number of these torn down in different places, and protests about the colonial past, the past of slavery, the past of building wealth and building cities on the backs of exploited peoples around the world. But even the question of being able to recognize yourself in your own city, as someone very adequately said yesterday, cities are not so much parts of nations anymore, they are parts of the world. They are microcosms of the world, and our public spaces need to be reflective of that. Now, it's not always possible to reflect everybody, and all public spaces are contested, but to think about this and to think about planning for it, and then to think about involving citizens of the city in the design of public spaces and public art in public spaces is something that we consider to be very important for us going forward in the design of Malmö as an expanding city. So that's very concrete, if you like, to review, maybe not to, maybe sometimes one doesn't need to tear down, but sometimes one needs to complement and tell another side of the story alongside those those pieces of public art that were previously thought to be adequate, to share the other side of the story in that. And that's something that we're looking very much at here in Malmö.
Thank you, Fiona, for that. I will keep in mind, you know, that this issue about an open process of involving citizens in the planning is absolutely important. We have said this, but I liked very, very much your take on it's important to complement, not tear down. It's not about destroying, it's about building, you know, on top of, in complement with, etc. And this is a process that indeed requires a lot of, well, skills, diplomacy included, and capacity, I would say emotional capacity and connectivity with the people. Huh? So thank you for that. Ariel, would you like to contribute something on this?
Thank you. So in the spaces that I have the privilege of being in, the sentiments, and we have a song, a local song, we make the circle big, and there's like sort of really cool dance moves that go with it. I think artists and I think cultural practitioners in South Africa are absolutely capable of making a concrete proposals. The huge disconnect comes in, I think, in our ability to communicate effectively and in a language that government officials and politicians understand. And the next huge disconnect comes in with implementation. And I'm sure this is not only pertinent to South Africa. I'm sure governments, you know, in other countries and other places might face similar challenges. Here, particularly, there's huge contestation between our particular Department of Sports, Arts and Culture, and the challenges and conflict arises when artists are not being heard in a way that allows them to, one, be able to voice, two, be able to voice in a way that needs to be understood. So what sort of government and those in sort of track one diplomacy, the powers that be sort of understand or have a limited understanding of what arts and cultural practitioners need to what the reality is on the ground. And sort of if I put a different hat on, my sort of culture diplomat hat on, I think that's where the young people and practitioners that have expertise and experience in merging these silos and being able to have these effective and tough sort of interrelated silo conversations and dialogues is incredibly important. You know, musicians and artists and cultural practitioners, we work with heritage and memories and futures. We're not necessarily great with crunching numbers and sort of fitting the pieces of the puzzle structurally together. So I feel like in order for art and culture to thrive and for more and new people to experience that, there are so many more components and stakeholders that need to be around the table and finding a way to listen to each other's languages. Thank you.
No, thank you. Thank you for that. This idea of, you know, that artists are capable of, it's a question of solving the disconnect that you mentioned. And that is, I would say, a responsibility that lies within different spheres, not only an individual sphere, but also from public administrations, private institutions, and the cultural sector as a whole indeed. So it's up to us also to take on the responsibility of solving this disconnect that I think we all feel, understand, and are aware of. Let's go to the issue of protect. I will come back at the end of the chat to the share with a final issue, but let's go to the protect. We have said that it is about ensuring a legacy, but it is also about ensuring that rights, in particular cultural rights, are not only protected, but are made real. That we can actually exercise as citizens, as people living in cities, these cultural rights. So my first question is, on the one hand, about the legacy. How do we go about this in concrete terms? And the second part is regarding the rights and the duties that go along with the rights, because rights always have the reverse, which is the duties that go with them. How can it be tackled, this from a value perspective and or a normative perspective? You are both involved in city planning, in policy making. It's not necessarily normative in terms of legal, but indeed in terms of policies. So please, again, legacy on the one hand, and enabling the implementation and fruition of these rights. How can we do that? Possibly with concrete proposals. Again, who wants to take the floor first?
I can jump in with some ideas and maybe jump in again later. That's quite a big question you've posed there, Mercedes. But these are big issues, so that's fine. I should say at the beginning also that in Sweden, the rights of certain minority groups are protected in law. We have 5 minority groups in Sweden who, I can name them, that's Jewish people, people from the Sami region, Roma, Finnish people, and people from a special region of Sweden, which is called Tor Finlander, whose cultural rights are protected in law. And so, you know, protecting the legacy is incumbent upon every local authority to do that. But of course, in a city like Malmö, where we have 184 different nationalities and groups, many groups, of course, legacy it applies to much more people than those legally defined minorities in Sweden. So I think it's also important to talk about material and immaterial legacy here. It's not just about you know, putting up statues or even putting on, you know, theatre performances or making pieces of art. It's also about stories and understanding the role that the majority society has played in Sweden in excluding people, letting those stories have to come out, and they are, you know, those are painful and controversial stories to be told that involve a lot of hurt and involve a lot of sensitivity in handling. So these are, this is also an important part of protecting legacy in a city such as Malmö. So I'll come back to the question on duties, because I think I'm going to have to consider that a little bit more, maybe while Ariel is speaking about these issues, and come back to that.
Thank you. So I take, you know, the issue of protected by law, Fiona, but allow me to be a little bit critical here, and I hope in a constructive way. It's not only about, you know, protection by law. We are all equal in front of the law, but this does not always necessarily, you know, it's not really necessarily always transposed in real life and in real practice, in the sense that we must make the most of our capacities to develop specific policies that support, you know, the fact that such rights are actually made real and are capable, we enable people to exercise these rights in a very concrete way. It's about, you know, one always uses the term fruition of rights. It's not only having the right, you know, in a legal text, it's about making it real, but we'll come back to that. Ariel, please.
Thank you. I'm taking a deep breath in and out, because this for me is huge. And we say, you know, we eat an elephant one bite at a time. Culture policy and this whole arena is, I would say, a long time interest, but in terms of really dipping my toes and sort of being fully immersed was a very recent experience. And, you know, South Africa has been praised for having one of the most progressive constitutions in the world, but at the same time, like, you know, we have the highest Gini coefficient. So every day and every moment, I live in this constant tension, dichotomy of paradoxes. Recently, September 24th, South Africa, we had our public holiday, which is Heritage Day. And I came across this article, which I found really, really disturbing. That, you know, South Africa itself, we have 11 official languages, 9 of the local African tribes, but there are actually more. And this article was talking about how children in their schools on Heritage Day, they are permitted to wear their heritage costumes to come to school. But this article highlighted the children from other African diaspora that we, a few years ago, had a huge xenophobic outbreak. And that these children from other African nations were scared to put on their local costumes for fear of being attacked or banished or teased or bullied. And, you know, when you said practical, and this might sound a bit, it's not trivial, but it almost sounds very, for me, it's very human and on a very basic human connection level. Go have lunch at your neighbor. And, you know, we can, you know, go have tea at your neighbor. You know, South Africa, when I lived in Cape Town, we had this thing of, you know, pop in for tea. And I say this not with a pinch of salt, but, you know, 3 huge teaspoons of sugar, because at the end of the day, the laws can, you know, go through its iterations. They can go through the processes, you know, through all of these long and convoluted processes. But at the end of the day, can we really recognize who we are in relation to, you know, the people that we are surrounded with and that we are surrounded by? And, you know, Ubuntu is not only a South African or African concept, but this notion of I am because you are because we are. And the sense of being this mosaic together, not so much the melting pot, that I don't have to melt away my identity in order to be a contributive, artistic, culturally creative person in the community that I belong to. So for me, it's in the same breath of protecting and sharing my culture, but addressing the fear and the unknown, at the same time of acknowledging the culture of somebody else that may be different from me. And if I sort of put my third culture hat on, I'm, you know, Taiwanese born, raised in South Africa, and then I have this sort of like mixed identity crisis happening depending on where I go. But for me, that's very real. And increasingly, young people and people sort of around my generation are becoming sort of more polyglots, in the sense that it's not just, you know, the blood that we carry, but sort of where we want to go next. So also I feel like Protect and Share has this great nurturing quality of emerging with something new, and being fearless about
it. If I might come back also, and coming on from Ariel's point there, actually my background is not in culture at all. My background is in citizens' rights in the UK, citizens' rights movement, and there is no, you can have, as you so rightly say, Mercedes, you can have all the laws in the world, but if people are not able to exercise their rights within the law, then it's virtually pointless in having them. And there is a great inequity in people's ability to exercise their rights under the law. We need to not only listen to artists and to institutions, we also need to listen very closely and have a relationship with civil society, because this is where the idea of protection of legacy and the promotion of rights has always had its wellspring in civil society movements, and opening up platforms for civil society to be able to collaborate with, for instance, artists, is an important way of protecting legacy, and having an open and continuous dialogue around that, rather than having a top-down approach of that the city or even the artist knows best, that this has to rest on three legs. And in terms of duties, I'm always a little bit kind of you know, nonplussed by the idea of duties, the duties of the individual. I am a rights-based person, and that's my background. You know, the duty of the citizen, if you like, is only to participate on the premise that they can accept. They don't have to, and we can't force them to. It has to, people have to be able to come freely to the table if the table is laid out in a way that is interesting and accessible to them. And then, you know, then as someone spoke about yesterday, that's the difference between being a resident and being a citizen. When you start to participate on the basis that you can influence, you can make changes, you can express yourself in those platforms.
Can I quickly jump in? In a place, thank you, in a place like South Africa, there are no tables. And I say that maybe provocatively and respectfully, because the table or tables have been available and present and beautifully decorated for privileged few and for a long time. And, you know, 20 plus years into our democracy, it's no whiff of a table is anywhere near for other communities. And not to say that they have any less culture or are less cultured. And for us, and I think in the sort of spaces that I'm in, we're interrogating, like, okay, well, do we actually need a table? Like, well, screw it. You know, what are the other sorts of non-conformed, confined spaces can these rights and duties be expressed, and be expressed in a way that is joyful and willingly so? Yeah, so I just wanted to put that in there.
Yeah, but I mean, you're both saying something very similar. Huh? Maybe the situation, not maybe, the situations are indeed different, but you're both expressing the importance of enabling participation in whatever form that is possible, and pooling, you know, from the energy resources that individuals, also artists, of course, and cultural professionals can put into these processes. I have only a couple of minutes left. I am enjoying very much this conversation, so it's a bit frustrating, but we have to abide by, you know, timing. Let me ask you one final question, ladies and friends. In the charter, it says that art exists when it is recognized. One thought from each one of you on this sentence, please.
I would only say that in order to, I agree with that, art is only, you know, exists when it is recognized, and the task that we have together, both the cities themselves and their collaborators and hopefully partners in the cultural life and in civil society, is to build an arena that people can recognize in the first place in order to come into and make their art. And, you know, that's going to be a very important part, or make their culture. And that is going to be a very important part of the development of cities in the future as microcosms of the world, rather than microcosms of nation states.
Interesting, huh? Microcosmos. So no, that's an interesting concept indeed. Thank you for that. Ariel.
Thank you. Also agree. I think through art, people can recognize themselves and each other. And through that recognition, whoever they are, wherever they are, with whatever resources that they have or they don't have, that they are truly to be able to create value through that recognition. Thank you.
Thank you. Creating value. Are there any questions from the participants? I don't see any in the chat, but maybe we can take one if there is, but no, let me see. interesting comments that I think I'm sure that the organizers will pick up, but no direct questions to either of you right now. I would, you know, say that this has been a pleasure. It's been an honor for me to be with you both this afternoon. I have learned a lot, and that is always, you know, part of what I think makes the difference in this sort of conversation. And I cannot but appreciate and acknowledge that you have both played the game because the questions were not prepared beforehand. So you've been wonderful, and you have, you know, pitched in with very precious and interesting contributions. Thank you so, so much. Take care.
Thank you so much. Thank you everyone who's been here and listened and contributed. Very nice to meet you all.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, Jordi. See you soon.
Thank you, Fiona.
Yeah.
Thank you, Ariel.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mercedes.
Thank you.
Extraordinary discussion. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Jordi.
Thank you, Ariel.
Was
Well
that the
done.
last session? Do you get to rest now?
Yes, we deserve that. We all
Good.
deserve a good rest.
Absolutely. Thank you. I'll be in touch. That was really fantastic. I really
Thank
appreciated
you.
being invited. We'll connect soon. Thank you.
Thank you.